Ready? Aim!
There's too many!
Anyone see my mammoth?
Stubby! Hello! Hello. We're back. I'm back. Carlo's back. It's Monday. Right, I think that's everything sorted. Carlo, how are you doing? Hang on, give me 2 seconds. I've managed to mute Carlo, which is, as standard, very impressive for me. I'm really good at this, aren't I, guys? There we go. Try that now, Carlo.
Hello.
There we go. Exactly. Yeah. See. It's because we tried to fix Discord, and we don't do it through Discord at the moment. And
there's no fixing Discord.
Discord's broken. Let's not go there. So, how you doing, Carlo?
I'm good. Can they actually hear me now? People still saying I'm muted, but I think that's delayed response.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. It's good to be on. Chatting to the people.
Chatting to these plebes. Is that what?
Yeah, exactly. Talking to the peasantry.
Right. Obviously, prior to today's episode, I was talking to Carlo briefly, and I was asking how he's going, how his games were going, everything like that. And it turns out this guy has barely played, right?
Nope.
Oh.
I played, as I said, I played some janky Stark stuff down in down in London at the circuit. Not every round, but most rounds I was needed to make the players even. So I had a bit of fun. Tried some things. It had its moments. I enjoyed it. It just hit the right spot of like it was very playable, but also was not really in contention for ruining people's tournament. So that hit about right for me on that kind of front. But that's about the only games that I've played in a long time. Because I've been head deep in kind of rebuilding the site very slowly, so that keeps me away from the big nasty TTS. And unfortunately, the club just don't seem to be able to get our act together and get in the same place on a Friday night or any other night. So it's been quite a drought on the game, But like, I will admit that with the club and the way it is, basically, like if you really made the effort, if I really, really wanted to, I could get down there and like I could convince somebody to come and play me. And I don't have a burning desire to play at the moment. Like, like if a Friday comes around, I will go to the club and I will play if I'm free. I'm not like so unhappy with the game, but I'm not like really going out of my way to find games at the moment. I think that basically like I think that while there's nothing wrong with the season 2 changes, they're nearly all moves in the right direction. And I could even say that I think that the balance is the best it's been in like an extremely long amount of time. It's just not very exciting. It's not like it doesn't grip me and make me want to try things out. The only thing that really had some interest was Lannisters had some new, not even really new play styles, but like were given a little bit of a lease of life, and that kind of gave me some interest in the build up to Always Winter. But been there, done that. That did work out how I thought it was going to. And so all that's left for me that's of interest is the Night's Watch changes. I think that they're the two factions who can like look at the 2021 season 2. Do we call it that?
Yeah, it's 2021 season 2. That is right. God,
we'll stick with that. We're not calling it, like 1.7 or anything weird, right?
No.
We just call it season 2. The season 2 changes only really brought interest, I would say. Like it, like interest in seeing how things have changed, interest in like what new lists you could and should put together and how they kind of fit into the meta. For me, they only really hit Lannisters and Night's Watch on that front. And I feel like the Night's Watch, it's weird actually, because it's not actually true of my own experience, because it didn't really happen in Scotland the way I thought it would. But like Night's Watch already looks to be talked about and played to death, shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
And like its new format and new construction and the auto include of coring and stuff like that, and like the real heavy reliance on or usage of the Ranger Vanguard outflank and stuff like that. While it seemed super exciting at first, it now just seems to be done by everybody, and so I'm already not interested in it, having not played it.
Yeah,
I'm torn on that one. I still feel like it's the only thing that I will play out of interest to find out how good it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I just season 2 didn't change enough to keep my interest for long enough, which at the moment just leaves me a bit, no burning desire to go out there and find games.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I've played a on and off amount of season 2, mixing up what factions played and things like that. And it's weird because I do enjoy the game still. Like you were saying there, I still enjoy the game. Like functionally, the game is still great fun, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Mm.
It's just, you're right in that it's not interesting. That's actually what I'm at. For me, it's not that interesting. And what I'm typically playing factions on the lower half of the spectrum now. And yes, previous season, we talk about balance. We talk about kind of where the game is at. There was definitely like problematic free folk. And then pretty much everyone else, right? It was either free folk or everyone else. And now it feels very much that there's the haves and the have-nots. And the haves is one group, and the have-nots is another group. And if you're in the haves, you get to play games and you can present builds that are interesting. And if you're in the have-nots, it's like you have 1 or 2 maybe builds that will work. And everything else is probably just going to get shit on by if someone brings a have faction. And it doesn't even have to be a good build in the have faction necessarily. It's either a good faction or a specific build in a bad faction that is good and worthwhile playing. And that's just not, I don't know, it's just not that interesting or fun in my opinion sometimes. Like
Yeah, I think a little bit differently about it. I still think that like every faction when built right beats every other faction when built wrong.
Yeah.
Like I don't quite class it as just like a bad Lannister build just like beats a good Stark build. But I think the issue is that like there are certain factions that even when you build them as well as possible and play them as well as possible, there are certain matchups and things that if your opponent builds them well and plays them well, then the game's just not in your own hands. Like you're basically just hoping that something really bad happens, right? Like, and that's very much how I felt. That's very much how I felt in season 1. Like my perception was that that's what Mance was to everybody.
Yes, which I agree.
It's in the Mance player's hands. If he's built his army right and he plays to a certain standard, then you can't win. Now, I think that now exists either in particular matchups or just like in the haves and the have-nots, sort of. It still exists, it exists, but it's a much broader spectrum now. It's like, if these 4 factions bring their absolute pedal to the metal gas pair of lists and they play to a certain standard, these have-nots just cannot run with them, no matter how well they're built. And, within like perfections, like within realistic terms, you're just not going to win, no matter how well you play. But I still think that like those have factions, if you build them shit, like they're still nothing special, right? Like, if you build a shit list, you're still building a shit list. Like, and I still think that that's one of the issues. I mean, I think one of the complicated things that talking about is like there's things that like very competitive players consider shit lists, right? Like semi competitive things. Like you're not just like pointing at like a unit and being like, mate, this is dog tier, what are you doing here? It's just like the whole composition isn't quite right. It doesn't have quite as many threatening elements as it needs to have, or its activation count is low, or gonna say the big crazy thing, which maybe it's 2 NCUs. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's like, generally speaking, like it's not just bad. It's not just flat out bad, but basically it's gonna get exposed in like a really hard matchup, right? And that's a lot how I felt about the Stark list. I played 2 NCUs. It had some strengths. It was really built around this, like it built to be 2 NCUs specifically because it opened certain things up with the dogs. It had 2 dire wolves in, 8 activations, still had 2 units of Tully Cavaliers in there. Like, it was a very specific build. It's not just like, oh, let's just play 2 NCUs for the memes. Like, you can't afford a 3rd NCU because you're leaning very heavily on 2 dogs as 3-point activations, which you can't swap for an NCU. Effectively, it's a real niche thing.
You're basically paying for 8-point packages anyway, between dog and 5-point units.
Yeah,
for the whole
but that can't be split in half. No. It can't be split in half, so you're either playing 4 NCUs or playing 2 NCUs, right? So it's not just like, hey, let's play 2 NCUs for the sake of it. It's a build which can only exist just like that. But then I played into Doran NCU Martells, right? And suddenly, like, I'm just so under pressure, like, continuously, that the game is nigh unwinnable, right? Like, it really is, like, nigh unwinnable. I'm caught between either, like, totally ignore it and let him just, like, win the game on points, or I lose so much board position and tempo and like plays that I want to make because I can't continuously block. Oh, also throw in, I'm not using Littlefinger. So like that's also not just like 2 NCUs that, it's 2 NCUs missing one of the most major blocking pieces of Doran NCU. So this is like, and it comes back to that, like, there's nothing wrong with that list. It's not a bad list, but competitively speaking, it doesn't play well into the meta.
No.
Right. Now, I would say that most competitive players would be like, that's a bad list.
Because it's easier to say it's a bad list than it is to explain why.
What I'm saying is when we actually, what we need to be careful about is like, there is a wild tier of worse things that you could play, right? So when we talk about like X, the haves and the have-nots, if you take one of the haves and build like actually really bad stuff, throw in loads of attachments that you don't need and don't have any real use for, pick like actually really objectively bad units and stuff like that. Now, if you actually build those kind of lists, then it's Wild West. Anybody can beat anything, right? Like, because you're not even really, strictly speaking, playing 40 points versus 40 points anymore. If one of us has spent 5 points on worthless attachments and the other one hasn't, then it's not 40 points versus 40 points. It's more like 37 versus 40, because those 5 points of attachments just literally weren't worth 5 points.
The vast majority of the time, yeah. They're not going to get their value.
And so I think that the idea of what can beat what is in a very narrow scope of, I think that some of the boredom and the and I wouldn't say lack of creativity, because it's not for lack of trying. Some of the stagnation in competitive play and there needing to be more change for season 1 is the fact that I think that a lot of people out there are building towards the higher end now of what is good lists, right? Like, most people have a very good understanding that huge amount of the stuff in the game is just really bad choices, and it's not that they're not being fluffy, it's not that they're being power players or whatever, it's just nothing about them that's worth picking. And so huge amounts of the game are ignored, huge amounts of the game don't get any use, which means that the amount of things that we're actually playing with is quite small and narrow.
Mm-hmm.
And the matchups become repetitive, repeatable, and stuff like that. And it's really, really hard, because when there's such a huge gulf between what is like a good list, top tier meta list, and how bad you could make it while still paying 40 points, how are you ever going to find the middle ground for like how bad you should make your list? Like, if we both decide like, oh, let's take B tier lists to the club this week, it's like B tier is so hard to categorize. It's so hard to put a value on and to put a scope on, mm-hmm. that you end up having to do stupid stuff where like you build each other's lists, or do you know what I mean? Like, and so I do think that it's actually really, really hard at the moment to make interesting matchups, because the upper end of list building is so wildly more powerful when you understand what it's doing and what it's trying to achieve. It's so wildly more powerful and basically playing a different game to the bottom end of list building. And so many games, I feel, are really determined in the list building stage and not really on the table. On the table is about not making a really major catastrophic mistake.
Yeah. And this is I mean, I'm not going to use my example as like a telling sign for it. But I played a game literally last night online. And I just looked down the list and went, what's one of the lowest? I'll randomly generate a faction I want to play. Right, I'll play Greyjoys this game. I'll go down the list, choose like some of the lowest commanders on the list, and I'll pick some of the lower commanders on the list, and I'll just use lists for those guys. And my opponent is, not a bad player by any stretch, but is rated significantly lower than me in ELO. So I'm trying to make the game as even as I can by taking a lower rated commander, like the Rob, or in this case I was running Victarion. And he ran Axel Baratheons with Melisandre. And I looked at my list pair and went, there's a good chance, if he just makes me fail panic tests, that I will lose. And there's a very interesting moment at the start of the game where he's debating about what his second terrain piece is going to be down. And I know exactly what he should put down, which is not the standard 2 corpse pile in the middle, but he should be putting a corpse pile close to a deployment zone, because then on the off chance if he wins the roll or loses the roll, he can choose deployment sides, and strangely enough ends up getting to choose deployment side, and choosing to then I had given first play.
Force you onto the side where you're already at -1 right from deployment.
Yeah, pretty much. And you can deploy around it and things like that, so it's not quite as simple as where you're -1. But like, I'm looking at my list.
A zone of the board that you can't traverse across without being -1, and
and it's not my opponent playing badly. It's my opponent arguably playing to his win condition. And you look at the field, and admittedly some hilarious panic tests, but you look at the field at the end of round 2, and it's like we've barely engaged, and I've already nearly lost 2 units just to panic tests. And there is no mechanic that I have in my list. There is nothing I have that says you can prevent this happening, and you want to get stuck in. You get your healing. There are all kinds of mechanics that will keep me in the game, but it forces a certain play style, and then your opponent goes, yeah, well, now I've got Axel and Blackguard. It's like, well, I'll shoot them off the board. Hang on. All of my melee units that require to get engaged to be healing can't engage that unit because they will die from the panic test that they take before they even attack. And that's not to say I didn't have a chance to win, but from the off, if I was playing, if I was playing somebody who I thought was significantly better player, perhaps, or if I perhaps wasn't nearly as good as I am in that matchup, right? And there's a lot to say about, but their skill differential. The skill differential was not insignificantly small, right?
Yeah.
But my point being, I don't really know how to explain it that way, but if that player was playing against someone, say, equally skilled, I don't think there would have been a game. Do you know what I mean? My opponent probably would have just smashed all over it, which he kind of did anyway.
I think for me, actually, I hadn't thought about it in a while. I hadn't really thought, to all the people in the chat, this isn't me suddenly coming on to complain about song, by the way. Me and Mickey haven't spoken about song in a while, so this is actually me and Mickey having a genuine discussion about song and how we feel about it. This isn't some planned thing about me wanting to come on and say I hate song. I also actually specifically did want to mention before, and then conversation just moved away. When I say that I don't particularly want to play song, what I'm actually really caught between, and my real problem is there is no game that I want to play more. Yeah. There isn't another game that I want to play. I just don't really want to play song, which is actually quite new for me. There's almost never been a time where I didn't want to, I didn't have a game that I wanted to play. Right, you know what I mean?
I'll challenge you on that, right? Because I feel a little bit the same, right? But I realise I do want to play. Yeah, I do want to play song. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to load up the best lists in the game. And I don't want my opponent to do the same. Do you know what I mean? I want to explore the game. I want to try things out. But you can't. It's almost like this very weird thing where it's it feels like you can try and explore the game, but if your opponent doesn't, there's no. Like you were saying before, you can't pick B tiers. It doesn't.
There's such a large gray area of shit. That it's so hard to know how shit is going to be until but anyway, I mean, that wasn't the point. It was more just I am interested in exploring my own ideas about why I'm not that excited by song at the moment. But I think that in amongst all of the things that are unattractive to play is this issue that I think that I don't know, it's weird. I feel basically, and it could just be personal experience, but the overwhelming majority of people that I play, and this includes at tournaments around the UK and all sorts of stuff, they're playing at a standard that it doesn't leave loads of room for you to be better than your opponent. And I also think that this is I think that this is the ultimate ramifications of way back in when 2021 first came out. I did say, and I kind of warned people, that I thought that the decks were a lot more balanced. They were much closer in power level, much improved in that sense, but that they had removed a huge ability for somebody to make big plays, which removed large abilities for people to both be the better player because they're making really big, assertive plays. So when you remove that, you remove the amount by which player skill is the determining outcome, right? And by removing how big a play you can make, you make list a bigger and bigger part of what it is to win the game. Just like you coming to the table with a already advantageous position, advantageous unit selection, advantageous all sorts of things, it becomes a harder and harder kind of discrepancy to overcome if you can't make really big plays. And on top of that, I think that it just made the game a little bit less exciting. It also made coming back from a losing position harder if you can't make big plays. So I'm talking about, the things that at the time, they were very much the haves versus the have-nots. They weren't positives, right? I'm not saying, God, I wish that they necessarily came back, but we're talking about swift reposition maneuver, whatever. Swift advance. There we go. The existence of swift advance as just hey, by the way, this unit that's here, suddenly it's not infantry anymore, it's cavalry. You weren't expecting that. Or lots of really impactful on-death cards, like Old Winter is Coming. In a way, and now His Watch is Ended still exists in that form, but it's a bit more restrictive than it used to be. There also used to be, Baratheons. Not that the Baratheon deck was amazing by any stretch, but Baratheons used to be able to just cause D3+1 wounds as resilience. Yeah, we used to heal D3+1 wounds, and if you controlled a certain zone, you also inflicted it to somebody engaged with you.
The letters used to do the damage back.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when you think about the impact cards used to have, the ability to make really big, impactful plays. Now, you could say that they were too impactful. You can argue whatever, but the removal of that took away a large amount of player agency in the outcome of the game.
This is actually very interesting. We talk. It still exists in some regard, right? And there are, for certain players at certain skills.
I actually just want to follow up on that.
Yeah.
I feel like this has become part of what is the haves and the have-nots in a way, in that there are still just a few commanders and few factions who have the opportunity and possibility to still make big plays. And that is one of the only things that is worth bringing in terms of faction and commander, is cards, commander cards and faction cards and things that give you absolute game-changing fear factor for your opponent to have to play around, because the majority of cards are pretty low impact these days. And I think that that's the issue.
It's very interesting because, and again, I come at this from, it's all about interaction, right? It's all about setting up and thinking about interaction. And I think, again, perhaps one of these, I don't know if people considered this or the thinking that went into a lot of this kind of stuff, but a very classic one when thinking about the Targaryen matchup was always talking about the impact that Jorah had, especially if we're talking about something like Jorah vets, right? And one of the key pieces of interaction, which certainly Mance used to do, and one of the things I did a lot with Mance, but it's Kevin now as the kind of person who can do it effectively in the meta, was always the whole rigorous idea of the rules. And it actually comes back to the rules ultimately, I think, but this whole idea of declared resolve, right? In the whole point of being you declare scout openings from Jorah, I now have that information, in which case predictable maneuvers can come down and say, right, if your veterans do anything, I get to do something in response. And that whole interaction is like the play. You're shutting down your opponent's play or creating these moments of swing. And that comes from a rules interaction that, if you understand, you can not manipulate it, but use it to your advantage. Another really, really good one, which ultimately, Carlo, we had it in Scotland, right? But like, I have Fen Defiance from Styre in hand, and it's like, I'm going to pass my morale check, and you're going to take 3 wounds. And you're like, shit, definitely don't want that. That's pretty good. I'll counterplot it. You counterplot it, fair enough, and I just immediately slam down Final Strike, and you get slammed by Final Strike instead, right? That is an interaction that can be had. You can like bait a card out in the attempt to then use a different card, right? Those interactions still exist, but the problem is if you only have one of those resources, or you only have one of those potential things, it's like you can't even do that. It's like, I either play this or don't play this, and you go, right, well, I'll just cancel it then. You know, or I have the solution. Yeah. And that's where, you know, if I, again, in that exact scenario, if I was playing Baratheons, I'd go, bang, haha, I'll do a Final Strike, and you'll go, well, I'll cancel that. And I'll go, oh.
Yeah, if you can if you can list on one finger the things that you need to worry about,
yeah,
then like just don't let it happen.
yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? But like when somebody brings multiple threats, it's like Eddard in Starks. He's pretty good, right? Like he is pretty good.
He is.
But I can list on one finger. Let's go Fury for the Fallen. Don't let it screw you over. That's it. Don't let Fury for the Fallen win.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like and you know, somebody was talking about how great John is a threat, and it's like, yeah, he is, but he's got one threat. Don't let it happen. It's great John charges something, sacrifices a load of wounds, overruns into something else, and
kills that too.
Just don't let that happen.
Yeah,
you know, and you've already won. You know, like I'm it's not that simple, but when you can boil it down to that, because a commander or a faction or a list only brings a single dynamic threat, then like competitive players, like they do boil it down to that. Like it's just like, don't let that thing happen and I'll be fine. And so like the real threats and the real powerful things inside the game in general, it's you know, it's John Knight's Watch who are just like, okay, well you got Corin and these Ranger Vanguard, but also John and Ranger Hunters can also like blow you up. And now his watch is ended on the sacrifice with Corin. You have to think about that. And oh, by the way, all at the same time, I'm also shooting you with a Scorpion or something. You know what I mean? Like, oh, plus Cold Hands and Ghost are also just like trolling around. So you got to think about that too, right? And you've got like 3 threats spinning around. And like my recent experience with Kevin, it's like, you know, so you got Kevin crossbows. You really want to come in and kill him. Like you're gonna have to get in there, otherwise I'm just gonna shoot the hell out of you. But overextend and Knights of Castle Rock are going to absolutely bust you open. And by the way, those halberdiers can fight too. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing wrong with them. And what's that? Oh yeah, Mountain that Rides also kicks around. So like, you know, you better worry about you know, hear me roar, intimidating presence, or like auto wounds, effectively, all at the same time. And so it's offering a load of threats, and like and with Styre or Mance or Mag based list, it's like, you know, you'd be like, oh my god, Mag's gonna like go last, come in, do XYZ, and it's like, but there's a ton of the rest of the lists that doing auto hits, engaging you, outnumbering you, and like, and you're trying to position for Mag, but like, are you going to kill him? And when you kill him, he's going to hit you as well, like, and so. Or it's like, you know, Martells. You're like, oh my god, if I don't do something, I'm going to lose the game because Harmonal is sat right there. I mean, Doran Martell sat right there. And then it's like, okay, but when I charge, they're just like, all my abilities are gone. I'm doing nothing. I've got a disordered charge. And Oberon NCU causes me to take a load of hits back. And oh, by the way, he's set for charge. And it's like, so you, on one hand, you're like, oh my god, I've got to attack. But on the other hand, it's like every time you attack, you're playing right into my hand. And for me, they're the four halves at the moment, which is like they're like these really dynamic, multi-threatening factions, and like how they all interact with each other. And the rest all just seem very one-dimensional. It's not that you can't do something interesting. Targs are possibly there as like weirdly multi-dimensional, but also still shit. Somehow still dog shit. And so I do really agree that it is. There's nothing wrong with the rules of the game.
No,
it's just. And it's not like the balance. Oh god, the balance is like it's so unbalanced. XYZ so OP. No. It's just like the balance is like, why the fuck do I care about these characters? They're shit. They're not worth bringing. They're not good, and that makes list building very unexciting from a thematic viewpoint as well. Even though Song is built very heavily, we're not playing historicals here, right? We're not playing ancients or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's built on a very character-driven and very thematic IP.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I've almost never wanted to build a thematic list. And yet it was the main thing that I used to do when I played Warhammer. Every list that I ever built was built format first and foremost as theme, and no character in the entire franchise, in the way that they're implemented in the game, makes me want to play them just for the sake of wanting to play that character.
I see what. Yeah, I mean, I do agree to some extent. I think there are some characters where that's not true. I think there are some characters like, fan favorites like John, Oberyn Martell. People like that will always have, and we'll move on to fan favorites in a second when we discuss the news of the week, right? But there are fan favorites that will always see play, and people will build thematic lists around them. But it's not a lot of characters, because actually a lot of the characters that we see are like literally headline characters. We're talking about John, we're talking about Oberyn, we're talking maybe about Stannis. I would, to some extent, would allow people to say Mag the Mighty as well, because, big giant Ugug, everyone wants to play that character. And he also very much forces a themed list, which, it's kind of part of it. But yeah, there's not a huge incentive, unfortunately, and actually this comes back to the wider problem of kind of a discussion of today, which is neutrals, in that the kicker for those themed lists from characters that you want to run with their themed, like Rickard Karstark wants to run Karstark units, and then you look at his kickers and you go, not really. Like,
yeah,
because
these
bonuses don't outweigh the fact the unit is bad.
Because again, they tone down the level of impact that they allow a card to have. Like, a card isn't allowed to be extremely, extremely powerful. Now, that means that we don't have such harsh outliers that like this person just can't be beaten or whatever. But like when you're naming those things, right? Like you're naming the character that defines the faction, right? Mostly, like someone wants to play John, someone wants to play Stannis, someone wants to play whatever. And yes, okay, that means that maybe they do predominantly play that character as their commander inside of that faction. But really what it generally tends to cause and force is that it's just like that person plays Night's Watch, right? Now there are some people who do lean very heavily on like, okay, but I like only play that commander or always play that character in one of my lists, or
Scatman loves his John.
yeah, exactly. And that's great for those people, but I think it's really rare. But for me, it's actually one of the cases where like this is the only game where I don't find it, which I find really odd. And I don't know if it's just like the way I came to the game or whatever, but like, you know, like we never really kicked off with it. But, you know, like when I was thinking about getting into Legion and stuff like that, you know, I'm like, oh, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build like, you know, I'm going to build a Commander Cody like list, or do you know what I mean? Like, and like I don't know anything about the game, but like I'm basically like, oh, you know, that thing from the show, I'm gonna have that, and I'm gonna have that, and I'm gonna have that, and like I want to put them on the table, I want to build them and paint them like that, and then it like turns out they're crap. I'm like, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, cool, you know.
I mean, I'm thinking all the way back to when we used to play Destiny, Star Wars Destiny, right? And I can remember, and we all put like our different decks together playing different actions. I can remember when I put together like a Cad Bane, and was it like Jango Fett style thing? And I was like, mate, this is sick. And he was like, it's not very good. Yeah, but it's Bounty Hunters is sick.
Yeah.
And you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then it's easy to say from the outside that I'm not like ever sat and played Legion in a competitive, you know, like in a tournament, you know, so maybe I'd feel differently once I started playing and like started getting absolutely trashed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But like all of my ideas and concepts around like what I would want to play begins with a character and then like filters down. Whereas Song has never managed to capture that for me. It never begins with I want to play this character. Now it does begin and exist at times with I want to play this faction.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Like, and I feel like they do implement factions and their general style and their general like traits pretty well. I just think that the ability to implement characters and have characters represent what you think that they're supposed to has been wildly missed. And yet I don't intrinsically have an issue with the way that attachments work in units.
Mm.
I think that it's a very clean rule in the way it works, but it's not character centric enough for such a character hidden driven IP, I feel. And so I think that for me that really has never managed to capture like the idea that I'll bring a thematic list, because theme begins with a character, not like a faction identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so is it not just that I'm a Star Wars nerd, Doug? No, because like I say, like, you know, Star Wars is just like something that we almost played recently. You know, like Warhammer, it all begins by reading the background and being like, okay, I want to play the character, I want to play the army of this special character, I want to play like a Queek head taker Skaven list, I want to play I don't know, like I want to play a particular brand of chaos only, I want to play a Sigvald the Magnificent list, or do you know what I mean? Like
Orion of the Wild Hunt Wood Elf list. Oh yeah. That was my dream. That's my dream when I was younger.
So we'll leave that. Yeah. No, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't want to play High Elves. I want to play as Teclis, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't want to play, you know, I don't want to play Empire. I want to play as Volkmar, right? And like, you know what I mean? Like, or you know, I want to play Karl Franz. Whereas for me, it's never captured that. Like I say, like for some people it does. They don't want to play Night's Watch. They want to play John. But I think that's very rare. And yeah, like I could, like every game I've played, like it's character first, character driven first, and that just doesn't quite happen for me in Song for whatever reason.
There's a lot of interesting chat in the chat. People are talking about like theme and characters and stuff. I think one of the biggest reasons, and actually it comes back to, and this is partially balance, is that the characters are, as commanders, I actually feel that most commanders have captured their essence quite well, relatively speaking. but actually as characters, as like things that you pick out and put on the table, they don't capture the theme that well, and then they make them worse. Like, I mean, the travesty, the ultimate travesty is if you said Victarion has an ability called Relentless, you'd be like, that makes pretty much sense. This guy is supposed to just keep going and supposed to be basically unstoppable, like a bull, right? And then you see, oh yeah, and did you know that other people, such as generic bloke A, Bob, has also got this ability called that detracts from the theme of my character because my character no longer feels special.
Yeah, I would say that you might, if they entirely binned off all generic attachments and put all their effort into named characters, I think that we'd have a really big improvement. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you'd bring characters for the characters, not their rules anymore, because you disassociate like attachments from being characters, and just make them better. Just make them better. Like make them worth playing. Make them good.
Well, I
also like I think it's revolutionary. Like it's too much. It has to be 2.0 or whatever. It's stupid hypotheticals. But for me, characters as attachments, giving access to some kind of deck building mechanic where you could take one or more of their cards, even though they're not your commander, would actually be the real essence, I think, to unlocking like desire to play characters, desire to play lots of characters. So it doesn't have to even change wildly. Like, the really simple implementation of it is like, hey, I'm playing Kevin Commander. So I have my 7 Lannister cards, I have my 3 Kevin cards, and then I'm also playing Jaime attachment. And it's just like, okay, so I can pick one of Jaime's 3 cards, and I'm allowed to swap out any one of my basic 7 for one of Jaime's cards.
And then you'll be like, actually, hang on, I'm running this specific Jaime card. I might actually pay for Adam as well to be in this unit because I wanted them to benefit from it as well. And all of a sudden you end up with this chain reaction of building lists.
One of Adam's cards as well.
Yep.
And that can be in there. It could be NCUs or not NCUs. Like you can take it as far as you want. You can end up with somebody having 10 cards, none of which are their base deck anymore, if that's what they'd chosen to do, because they've got 7 characters who all brought 1 card each.
And then all you have to do, the only difference in this game would be at the start of the game. If we're interested in tournament setting, is you just say, right, this is my deck at the start of the game, just so you know. Or you can keep it hidden. You could.
I was just about to say, it really gives the ability to not know what's coming and have some unknown information beyond just, I don't know what cards are in their hand. You don't know what cards are in their deck. Now you don't know whether or not Jaime brought Jaime's auto pass card or Jaime's some other card. Jaime's cards are so crap, I don't even remember what they do.
But this is the whole discussion, right? And like the Magic the Gathering style, you can either play open deck or closed deck.
Yeah.
And actually, and this is where I think the real crux can be, and I know it's a difficult thing to do in a tournament, you already have time limitations, all that, but what is stopping you changing your deck between games?
Exactly.
Like, I'm playing against Greyjoys now, I want Hear Me Roar in the deck, and Subjugation of Power, those would be really handy.
So it's something that you fix at the point after you've locked in lists, for example, right? Like, yeah, I mean, like, basically, I think that the opportunity to elevate character-centric design ideas is what's most lacking in making me just want to like build lists just for the for the interest in them and the sake of them and the theme of them. Because adding Jamie to a Kevin or Tywin based list, it doesn't do anything except for the ability that Jamie has, which is no different to me just like adding a generic attachment who has very similar abilities, and so I didn't really bring Jamie. What I brought was Counter-Strike. That's what I brought.
Expert duelist, whatever it is.
Expert duelist and Counter-Strike, or whatever two things he has. I always forget. But he's got so many different versions.
That is interesting because, for me, attachments just become a short-handed way of labeling a set of abilities. Like Harmer's not Harmer. Harmer is specifically Sentinel and enhanced ability. That's what Harmer is, right? She's not Harmer, and that is kind of like it boils it down a little bit, but that is kind of the way it plays out. Should we continue this conversation? But actually, when we talk about the next big topic, we haven't actually discussed any news. So we're only 53 minutes in and haven't discussed a single news item yet. But actually, to be fair, I'm pretty sure we haven't discussed it because literally every man and his dog discussed it last week. There was articles on FOG. There was a small council radio episode. There was people, I think Brett and Grant from Cat's Miniatures did an episode and a thing about it. And our friends over at Tabletop Warden did a German live stream as well. Ilya, Yannick and Bartender over there did a German language reveal and discussion of this particular piece of information, which was Spain did their usual Spanish Asmodee thing and put a load of stuff up that was due to be released.
Is it still up?
No, it's not. It's not still up.
Okay.
And it went
definitely in the leaks category.
It's in the leaks category, and it all got taken down after it was put up. I believe the release dates were all set in August this year, but I'm not going to say that that's worth remembering or caring too much about because
Q3, right? Yeah, Q3 will do that.
Q3, we'll go for that. So, a couple of things were mentioned, and we'll mention the first one, which is they've changed the name of the game to Cancon de Fuego. No, that's just the Spanish for Song Ice and Fire. It is a Bolton faction. Now, I'm not really going to speculate too much on what this means, but for the faction itself, I think it's quite clear that the Boltons are going to be a faction. That much is obvious. Yeah, I know, right? But, right, it does bring up an interesting discussion point, which I'll come up to in a second.
Which is, who's been leaking to Mickey? Because Mickey's been saying that for the last 6 months.
What? The Boltons are... Oh, yeah, I know, right?
The Boltons are about to be the next faction. With strong levels of confidence.
Yeah, if anyone's watched the show and said, I think Boltons are probably going to be next, that wasn't just me saying unfounded things, that was me talking to someone else that I know, that's prevalent in the UK community, and he knows. So there you go. Cryptic. So we've got a couple of new units shown. Dreadfort Archers, which people immediately looked at and said, they look like Lightbringers, but not Lightbringers.
Lightbringers in a helmet.
Lightbringers in a helmet.
Yeah, Lightbringers with less visibility.
Lightbringers with poorer accuracy, because they're wearing helmets that are just silly. Which I will add, like, those helmets are incredibly silly for people firing those weapons because their head is incredibly well armored and shaped for a man that's then wearing basically nothing on his arms. Like, literally nothing on his arms. And also, there's nothing on the lower part of his head. Like, there's not even a pauldron blocking the neck, so it doesn't... Yeah. No. Let's not.
And an arrow that looks like it's currently burning his hand, but, whatever. Like, Are you giving away spoilers there on the rules? So
Self-inflicted panic. Anyway, we do have the much cooler and much more interesting, and I think a lot of like medieval type-esque people are very glad to see these guys, which is a unit spearman, which, you know, is very much the levy of the time would have been definitely spearmen rather than cudgel wielding maniacs, such as cutthroats. So yeah, Dreadful Spearmen, which sculpts wise actually look quite interesting as well. So those are the two units that we see there revealed. We also saw the Bolton Heroes 1. Pachow. And I am not going to lie to you. The box art looks interesting. But Carlo, what do you notice about the box art? And shall I show you the models for this box as well?
Yeah, go on.
What is... I use the term problem with these characters.
They're in the neutral colours?
They are in neutral colours, which is very odd. Right?
I don't know. There's 7 of them?
Yeah, seven heroes in the box.
Yeah.
Daniel's right. Right?
Yeah. Can you tell them apart? Could I tell you who's who?
Could you tell me who's who? Now, you probably don't even know who the characters are in the box.
The dude with the spear and the maester-looking dude. Guy with the rope.
Yeah.
Probably work out who he is. 4 in the middle. Definitely the 2 in the middle. So the 3rd one in and the 4th one in. Yeah, I mean, like, really hard-pressed. But, I mean, like, can anybody tell the difference between the 4 of the Kingsguard models?
No, they are the same model. I'm convinced they're the same model.
No, nobody really minds.
No.
Iris Oakerheart has some leaves on his cloak.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else knows who the other 3 are.
So, we'll go through some of the images for the models, because I think the images for the models are quite cool. And we'll start off with the heroes, and actually, I do think that these heroes are particularly interesting. We've got a new sculpt for Roos, but not entirely new. This is a sculpt I'm 99.9% sure has actually been seen, or... Yeah, this has basically been seen before, right?
Has it?
Yes. But you wouldn't call him Roos. This pose and model looks identical to the Jamie pose.
I was about to say, is that Jamie?
It looks identical. Apart from the fact that it's Roos, it actually looks exactly like the Jamie pose. The rock, the sword behind, everything. Even the arm out front, but he's got a shield, I think, in Jamie's one.
He's got a well cooler sword, though, with the...
He does have a cooler sword. Bastard sword, right?
Yeah.
I assume, anyway.
That's a much better Roos than his other 2 versions, who are a bit too skinny and not really enough going on.
This is Commander Roos on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Reek is the same. Theon, Reek is identical.
Yeah, bit sad. That's a bit feel bad, like when Night's Watch Craster was just Craster.
Yeah.
It feels a bit like that, but whatever, people got over it.
The Ramsay, I like the pose. It's a very heroic pose, admittedly, but it's a nice pose for what you want Ramsay, like the whole get him pose, which you'd expect him to be like. And then we've got NCUs. We've got Jane Poole and Walda Frey. If I get the
Walda,
pronunciation right. Yeah, it's Walda Frey, isn't it? Fat Walder. So Fat Walder, I'm going to throw it out there, top right, the fat one. And Jane Poole, who is acting like Arya Stark, will be on the bottom left. Or Arya Stark, or is she?
Sansa.
She's acting like Sansa, is it? Yeah. I can't remember.
She looks like Sansa.
She looks like Sansa. She looks incredibly like Sansa, but I think she's supposed to be Arya in the books. Or pretending to be Arya. Even though I'm pretty sure she's Sansa's friend. Anyway, I can't remember. So yeah, Jane Poole there as well. It's fake Arya in the books, yeah.
Okay, right.
And Sansa in the show. NCUs.
Yeah, look nice. Yeah, pretty good. Solid.
Cool.
Solid. Good start.
And pink dice with, Flame Man. Can't complain. Nothing there. I mean, the next image I've got to show you, though, I think. Remember, this is a render, not the actual models. But I think when we look at Guardsmen, and we said the new Guardsmen, they were good. They got glowed up, but they weren't amazing. They were a tier above the old Guardsmen, but they weren't like incredible. The new Sworn Swords were actually significantly better than the old ones, but they weren't like a tier up, right? Or like phenomenal. These guys.
Well, they were one tier up, not like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These guys legitimately are above and beyond old cutthroats.
Yeah, they are. They're way, way nicer. I do think that. I mean, obviously they are Northerners, but I do think that they're very similar to like the Karstark Spearmen.
Do you mean the Karstark Bruisers? The
a bit of both, actually.
Big tower shield with the big spear.
Yeah, so forget the shield.
Right, okay.
Forget the shield and the spear, right? The high shoulders, big cloaks, and broadness. I actually think that, like, particularly maybe like the squatting position of the guy right in the middle, the guy in the top right. Yeah, I think that they're maybe it's right, but they feel really like they basically would fit directly into the Stark roster, and you wouldn't be surprised that was new Stark models.
She-Bear's very similar as well, with the thicker.
Yeah. So not that the old Cutthroats were good or anything, but I do think that they're really nice models. I think they've lost a bit of their own unique aesthetic here, a little bit.
Maybe.
They're looking very northern, which I know is odd because they are northern, but yeah. They're nice on an individual scale. On an individual level, each one is very nice. I don't really know what I'm getting at, other than when I first saw them, I was like, I've seen those models before. Like, I haven't, but like, I've seen those models before, basically.
The oddest one is the very, almost, in my opinion, what has effectively been a complete aesthetic change in the Dreadfort Captain, which I believe is the bottom figure.
Center.
Yeah, with the sword behind his head. It's a very, like, the other ones you can tell, like, these are supposed to be new Cutthroats. Yeah. Whereas you look at him and I'm like, that, I know, I'm guessing here, but I'm pretty sure that's a new Dreadfort Captain. But, like, apart from the helmet, there is nothing else similar. So, it's good, though. It's good. I like them.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with them.
Good stuff.
They just weren't quite what I expected, I guess.
And then we have the talking point that everyone's worrying about because, we've seen this go well. The Bowmen. Which do genuinely look like they've got long
big bows. Big bows. Now, 18-inch range.
The interesting thing about these guys is the 4 poses they went for. Do you recognise the 4 poses?
I mean, I do. I recognise them from different places. Are they pretty much Stark Bowman poses?
Well, this is what got me thinking, right? And you'll have to forgive me from not being on camera for just half a second, because I'm actually going to get a box of them out for you. If I go to my old Greyjoys,
the thing is like they not to naysay it, but they do go through some pretty generic poses. Like the guy on the far left, like there is without a doubt that guy in the Lightbringers box. I would say the second guy in is like maybe it's just the weirdness of the article, the weirdness of the angle, is the pose that I'm least used to. But then again, the two poses beyond that, well, they're just kind of like normal bow poses. You can't really say, "Hey, that's stupid. Why is a guy pointing a bow forward and why is a guy pointing a bow up?" But it does feel like basically nearly every bowman unit has all of those poses.
Yeah. So the difference being Stark bowmen have got the kneeling down and things like that. You know, there are
Stark bowman, kneel on the front. Yeah.
But I'm going to show you the
Crossbowmen,
Greyjoys, right, in order. So I'm going from left to right. So starting above Carlo's head. This is the one with the most deviation. So just remember that. This is our first one. He's holding his bow. Like this is almost.
And he's going like this.
Yep.
Rather than having the arrow already knocked.
Correct. But basically, the sculpt we see in the Dreadfort version is like 2 frames. If you were capturing this as a camera reel or something, it would be 2 frames after this guy was to knock his arrow. So that one, there is difference. But then the next one in, he's a bit more dynamic with his pose, but it's with the way he stance of his legs, but it's basically this guy.
I mean, the second guy in, he actually really reminds me, partly because of the angle that we see his helmet at, he really, really reminds me of a Lord of the Rings orc.
Yes. Yeah. The eye slits and yeah.
The eye slit and the way the helmet is like the majority of his head and sort of doesn't really show his face or his features such that you can kind of hide the fact that he is just a human who's dressed as an orc. Yeah, like I honestly think that the second model in I've seen like in the Lord of the Rings range.
Here's our third model in, which if you just put a bigger bow on this guy, it would be almost the same. And then finally,
I have to go with Charles on.
Okay.
Yeah, can they not all knock their arrows on the correct side of the bow? Can they all either cross? Can they all either cross or all not?
Yep.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's just my 2 cents. Is that it does feel a little bit like there isn't much you could do with it. Just to be fair.
Somebody kneeling, there are only so many ways that you can pose a bowman.
Yeah. And Jammer is right in chat in saying that like they've effectively done the stages of drawing and firing a longbow. Shooting a longbow, I should say. So that's fine, you know.
They missed the stage at the very end where it cracks in half. That one. Carlo, that one's an inside joke just for Dan.
we don't do war pulls. This isn't a war game, Carlo. We don't do war pulls here. Oh dear. They're fine. Like this is the thing. They're actually fine.
They're fine.
When I saw them, I just look at them and thought the poses are about as probably generic as you can get. The models themselves look fine. But I don't really know what you can do with poses.
No, I mean, I already think that they do too much with poses. Like,
yeah,
I'd personally like to get rid of the second guy, and I'd like to have.
Is that me? Am I the second guy? Are you the first guy and I'm the second guy? Yeah.
I'd like to have a rank of the guy on the left, a rank of the guy who's third in, a rank of the guy who's fourth in, right? Like, rather than having them all mixed up. Some of the poses that they do the least with, while being nice, like halberdiers for Lannisters, are actually some of my favorite poses, right? Like, they don't try to do too much. Everybody, like, stands pretty similarly.
It's uniform. For a uniformed unit, that makes sense.
So yeah, like, you know, I think we're really reaching the limitation of what you can do with single piece poses with a huge range of miniatures. Like, there are like a huge number of different units which have now been designed under like quite strong aesthetics, being the only thing that you can use to differentiate them, because I mean there's only so many poses that you can do.
So we're not going to speculate on rules. Like, we're so far off seeing cards and everything for these guys that it's not really worth it. But as is always the case, people will speculate and people will think about it. And I did want to mention that these guys do have a very like Lightbringer vibe. Like, they really do. From the design of the box, what we see. And the only thing that makes me jump for joy at these is A, they're in the starter box, which is nice. At least we assume they're in the starter box, which is cool. And secondly, people have been saying, oh, they might be like 4-point or 5-point archers, 6-point archers, at which point I'm just like,
why does everybody think that they're 4 points? Like why do people just like come up with these wild theories?
I have no idea. But I'm like, cool. And this is where the nail in the coffin for me stands. In that, and it kind of brings on to the much wider discussion which we'll have. Carlo, you once said neutrals isn't a faction. Like,
every week, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know, right? But I think as much as we used to meme about it, it's not a faction anymore.
No.
Why on earth? Genuinely, why on earth would you play neutrals now? Now that the Boltons are coming out as their own faction, when Boltons are basically the core of what competitive neutrals or good neutrals is even worth running, and then you wouldn't have access to units like this, but you would have access to things like your cutthroats, and we assume Blackguard as well are being released in these, and your Dreadfort Spearmen. You quite literally, you could play neutrals where it's like, I can play Boltons in neutrals, or I can play Boltons in Boltons. In which case, that's a pointless waste of time. Because
I don't think it's going to come true, but I hold out a glimmer of hope that neutrals won't exist anymore. I mean, I don't think it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna happen. I think that there are some people who would be against it. Now, I'm not saying neutral units couldn't exist in some cases, and I really mean just like a few, like hedge knights. Let them be neutral, you know, like sure, you know.
Golden Company swordsmen.
Flayed men, put them in Bolton. Put them in Bolton. Let them be Bolton flayed men.
Golden Company, make them neutral. That's fine. You're paying for them. Who cares?
Sure. Yeah.
You know what?
Stormcrows, shove them into Targs.
Yep.
Make them part of Targs. Make the Boltons part of Bolton. And bloody mummers. I don't even know what you do with them, but point is that like I think that the existence of neutrals balance wise is the biggest issue in the game at the moment. You know, like outside of the long discussion that we had about like characters not being implemented in theme, right? I think that neutrals existing and the way that they are implemented is the biggest balance problem. Now, it's not because it makes the game wildly unbalanced. It's because it means that you have to be incredibly cautious with all of the interactions that various factions can have with neutrals. You have to consider neutrals plus that faction in every case. And you really water down the identity of each of the factions because they all have access to this homogenous bit in the middle, which makes them all have access to heavy cavalry in the form of, all of them have access to heavy cavalry in the form of flayed men. They all have access to mid cavalry in the form of hedge knights.
Yep.
They all have access to light cavalry in the form of Zorse. They all have heavy defensive infantry in the form of Bolton Blackguards. They all have archers for Stormcrows. They all have crossbowmen now for Golden Company. They also have heavy offensive infantry in the form of Golden Company. They all can bring an elephant like as a auto wounding or like no armor saves monster, there's nothing that you can do to differentiate a faction other than make its own in faction option better than that.
Yeah.
Because one of everything exists in neutrals, so you can't deny anybody other than free folk the option to be able to use every archetype. So you can't specialize them. And on top of that, the biggest problem is that Roos right now, I would say, stands out with the prevalence of Corrin and like the possible big bad of like Corrin existing in the meta.
Mm-hmm.
Roos is the number one control commander in the game.
Yeah,
and every faction has access to them,
and he performs quite well in a lot of factions.
And I think he's a great secondary pick in almost every faction. Almost every faction should consider Roos as their second commander in a list.
If anything else, Night's Watch.
Just as an FU to Corrin, if nothing else. Just to make people think about not using Corrin because that interaction is so extreme, right? On top of that, Littlefinger is still practically one of the best NCUs in the entire game, which means that almost everybody's second, if not their first NCU pick is Littlefinger inside of every faction. And what that does is it pushes out all of the less optimized NCUs inside of a faction. A faction only really brings one or two NCUs unless they bring amazing NCUs. And now that's basically their identity, is that they bring amazing NCUs and you might not take Littlefinger. And so it really pushes every faction away from its own identity into a homogenous identity, which is like all the faction now really brings is, well, here's my deck, right? Like my deck's better than your deck. I'm playing the same kind of units as you. They're very similar in their stats. They're very similar in what they can do because we've homogenized attack profiles. We've homogenized all these things. We've homogenized decks, but this deck is better than this deck, so I'm playing these. I think that there's very little obvious ways to differentiate the factions now, other than real standout pieces, like, you know, like Baratheons are the panic faction, not Lannisters, because Baratheons have Melisandre. Like, she stands out as like this panic-based thing that you can build your faction around. Everybody can bring Intimidating Presence Vicious, right? Like, yes, only Lannisters bring Hear Me Roar, but it's one card out of an absolute fuckload. Everybody could bring slow, heavy infantry if that's what they wanted to do. Everybody can do all sorts of things. Even Greyjoys get to bring cavalry. Like, not having cavalry isn't a downside that you can give Greyjoy, because they just can take Flayed Men and they can take Hedge Knights. That doesn't mean that I think that they should stand out as another faction like Free Folk that can't take neutrals, even though like Fluff really says that they shouldn't, considering they're not willing to pay for anything. Like, they think that you should earn it through the iron price, right? Like, who are they going to pay people? Like, as if they're going to pay for mercenaries. They generally are the mercenaries that other people pay to go and fight for them. And yet, it's not enough that you should be like, oh, they shouldn't have access to neutrals.
Yeah.
At like absolute best, neutrals should like list one or two factions effectively. It could be Bolton's or, you know, Bolton Flayed Men can be...
I'd allow Flayed Men in Stark, Boltons, and to some extent Lannisters post.
Yeah.
Like, post.
That's what it should say. You should have... And you should get 3 cards. There's no such thing as a neutral card anymore.
Yep.
Just like Stormcrows have a target card. It should be like, here's your Bolton version, here's your Stark version, here's your Lannister version. Forget all ideas of what neutrals are in the way that they currently are.
The card designs they currently have, like, this is actually really easy to do. You can still have neutral cards, right? You keep the card design as they've currently got, still have it as neutral, but what you do is where the faction icons are, you could easily have 3 or even 4 icons there, and that's how you decide what factions they're in. Oh look, it has these 4 shields. It can be used in any of those 4 factions. These 2 shields, it can be any of those 2 factions. It'd be super easy to do. You wouldn't have to change the designs of the cards almost at all. Use existing assets. God damn it, we could do it on the builder ourselves.
Yeah.
Interesting.
High Garden would just be Baratheon Lannister.
Yep.
You know, like you can, Golden Company can be whatever. You know, like it works for all of them.
Yeah.
And I think that it improves a lot of things. I don't think it's going to happen, right? I don't think it's going to happen, particularly because don't the card numbers indicate that there's a neutral deck in there?
Yeah, there's 52 cards in the deck, which is the same number as a playing card deck. Now, I'm going to throw out there and say that no, they are not giving us a deck of normal playing cards, as in like an ace through king and some, that's not what they're going to do unless they really want to troll us. No, if we assume the set number of cards for a deck of ignoring commanders is 14. You've then got, which we're almost 100% certain they'll come with 2 commanders in the starter box, because that's what they always do, and we're almost certain it's going to be Ramsay and Roose, because guess what? They're already commanders in the game. So they bring 6 each. It's 14 plus 6 plus 6 is 26. 26 doubled is 52. Go figure, 52 tactics cards in the deck coming in the starter box would imply everything in Bolton and then everything basically copied in neutrals, which is a good way of getting the neutral deck rather than having to invest in Heroes 1, but also a problem. Because Heroes 1 had other characters in it that you now still need to buy Heroes 1 to get access to Varys, Littlefinger, and who else? There's one more character in Heroes 1, isn't there? Is Roose Ramsay Reek?
It comes with Reek.
Roose Ramsay Reek, Littlefinger, Varys.
One of the really old boxes that came out really early, and you only get 5 models in it. Yeah.
Holy shit! I've got it somewhere around here.
It's a really raw deal now when you look at it, but when you look back.
Yeah.
Like Lannister Heroes 1 and Stark Heroes 1 are also really raw deals. You only get like 5 characters in each of them.
That sucks. Wow, it's been that long. I do apologize. My game knowledge is going slightly.
Yes, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, that is kind of bad, but we're assuming that Varys and Littlefinger aren't going to be Bolton. They're going to remain neutral, right? Like, why would they ever be Bolton? So Neutrals Heroes has a ton of overlap with the Bolton starter box, which makes it a bit of a waste from that regard if you have the Bolton starter box. But, Tycho. There you go.
No, Tycho's Hero 2. People saying
there we go.
Tycho's is Hero 2.
Maybe question myself there.
No, yeah. If you're worried, I'm checking out the War Council app just because it is the place that's worth checking.
So I don't think Bolton buyers should care that they have overlap with Neutrals Heroes 1.
No.
Like, if you want to buy Neutrals Heroes 1, then that's your choice. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if you want to buy an ancient box to get those 2 models, then yeah, sure. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you're probably not worried about like the volume of models that you get or like the overlap because you're buying it because you want Littlefinger, right? Like, is competitively speaking, and if not, then well, I guess you didn't. Somebody might buy it and be sad, not realizing the things that they got in it. But I don't think. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, I don't think we have to constrict ourselves to what already exists when designing new stuff. No. Partly because like that box is barely even available anywhere anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's an old box, very old box.
I don't think it's Vargo either. I think Vargo's in Neutral Heroes 2.
Vargo's definitely in Neutral Heroes 2 because Vargo and Dario are the 2 commanders in Heroes box 2, and you always get 2 commanders.
Vargo, Dario, Tycho, Walder Frey, and Brienne,
and Bronn. No, bronze in that and one more. Jack and Nagar.
Jack and Nagar.
Yep.
Sure. There you go. Which then, it just brings up to like 7. That becomes the standard. Like even these days, you get like 7. One of whom's like cavalry and stuff like that. Like the amount that you get in modern ones is way better than you could. Yeah. So
anyway,
I think the Boltons will be popular.
Yeah.
I think that the models look great. I think it's good that we're still getting factions coming out, because I was concerned that there's been very, very little on the horizon for the game for a while, right? Like it seemed like there was nothing particularly for people to look forward to or get excited about. But for me, it's not a huge thing. I'd really like to see neutrals become this, but I don't think it's going to happen. That's
it, isn't it? And I think that's the crux for me, is that like I'm not that excited about this, but I understand why people are excited about this, and that's fine. And what I am excited for this mostly is this will be a new faction to the game, and it should be a new thing that can enter the balance and be a discussion point. What frustrates me is this basically almost confirmed knowledge that neutrals is still going to be a thing, at which point I'm genuinely looking at neutrals as a faction in the game that you'll still have on the website, we'll still have to keep updating and this, that, and the other. But you look at it and you're like, why? Why do you exist now? What purpose do you exist? Because Dario is in Targs. You've got all your Bolton stuff is now in Boltons. Are you really here just to service Vargo Hope to have units and a faction and like non-Targ neutral, and like none of these units are any good anyway. Like Vargo and Dario, in case people aren't aware, right? People say, they don't get played. That's what the problem. No. Vargo and Dario get played as commanders in neutrals, right? Yes, neutral win rate is incredibly low. I would filter by neutrals here and show you like where they stand, but it doesn't give you the full impact of just how bad they are, right? They're the worst 2 commanders in the game. By a long way.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about like in faction worst. They are legitimately 2 of the worst commanders in the game. Play rates horrifically low, win rates sitting at barely 40%.
Yeah, so like to say like, they don't get played, you can't get to that lower, you can't go to that negative a ranking without being played.
Yeah.
They're played just enough to give them horrific win rates and make them really, really bad.
Like, 100 games isn't many, but to have a 40% win rate or lower, that's really not good. Talk about it internally here in neutrals, and there is a reason neutrals are 50 points off the bottom of Greyjoys in second to last place. They are truly goddamn awful.
I mean, is it, post saying like people will be mad if you take neutrals away as a faction. Actually, it's not neutrals as a faction that annoy me, because neutrals as a faction just like don't fucking matter. Who cares? Like do whatever you want. You want to play shit tier lists? Play shit tier lists. And that's what playing neutrals is.
People are welcome to do their own thing.
It's the way neutrals exist in all the other factions.
The impact they have on the game, right?
The impact that they have on the wider balance, the wider list building availability, the wider list building mechanics in general, which I think needs to be really overhauled. The easy baby steps are to really reduce the percentage. But it's like how far? Like even if you give 10%, if you give 10 points of neutrals in 40 points, so 25% neutral allowance, you're still going to see basically 10 points of neutrals taken, or like basically someone will either take some cavalry at like 6, 7, or 8, or they'll take an NCU or a couple of NCUs. Basically, like everybody's still going to use 1 or 2 pieces of neutrals, and that will remain at like nearly 90% usage. Like nearly 90% of all lists have some neutrals in them. Yes, we might mean that there's an opportunity cost to taking Littlefinger now, such that you can only afford certain neutral units alongside it. But really, I feel like we should be limiting it to like 8 points or 5 points or something. But even then, you're just like, well, okay, basically neutral units don't exist in other armies, only neutral NCUs do. And that still hasn't got around the issue that I think that Rus Commander is still your best, one of your 2 or 3 best commanders inside of every faction right now.
Yep.
And that means that we just don't see people fielding their own commanders, which should and is one of the only ways that we do implement characters in this game, because you have to. You must pick one character. The only other way that we implement characters in this game is NCUs, because NCUs are powerful enough and impactful enough such that people will pick 2 or 3 of them almost exclusively. But again, I feel like very few people are picking them for the character that they are. They're picking them for the rule effect that they have.
Reminder, the best character ever to exist in the whole universe of everything ever, Shira Errol, was released as a mainline character in the base Baratheon box. And it was a legitimate thing when we sat down as players way before Tourney Ground existed as a concept, and mind a show, and Baratheon players who picked up the box were genuinely everywhere like, who the fuck is Shira Errol?
Yeah.
And that was a wasted opportunity at an actual named character that could have been, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, Bolton's, they're not doing it for me, but, you know.
But they are a good addition. I think this is the thing. They are a good addition to the game. Yeah. It's just that if that's the only thing that they're doing and they're missing the opportunity to do the other...
It dredges up the issue that, like, this is the one opportunity for neutrals to, like, not exist anymore. And
yes,
it's like,
or to actually overhaul them properly and do something interesting with them.
But not going to.
But it sounds like they're not going to. Which is sadness. There was another thing revealed, and this is a little bit more... There was no... You know, as much as that was a bit of a neg moment, I do think the Boltons is going to be interesting. I'll play them. I'll go get the faction badge in them. But it's going to be fucking weird, right? It was already weird with Targs. It's going to be freaking weird playing Boltons and then playing neutral Rus in Boltons.
Yeah, I mean, I don't...
Or neutral Ramsey in Boltons. I really hope...
We don't really talk about it. Do we think that Rus is going to have a new version? Do we think Rus and Ramsey are going to be new versions?
Well, if they're not, what are they doing with the Bolton deck? Right, that's all I'll say. I don't know, but if they're not new versions of the same characters, then what are they doing with the Bolton deck?
Okay. So you reckon... So do you think there's going to be 2... I mean, because all the cards are duplicated, so are there going to be 2 versions of neutral Ramsey Commander and 2 versions of Rus, neutral Rus Commander? So there's going to be 2 Ruses and 2 Ramseys available to everybody?
Potentially, because that might explain why there's a weird number of attachment cards and things in the box. But... it also brings under a much wider conversation, is the neutral deck going to be different to the Bolton deck? Because if they are duplicated decks, what is the fucking point? The decks have to be different.
Yeah, they do, but...
otherwise there is literally a complete waste of time.
I hadn't considered that they would be new cards, which is silly because, I mean, there are multiple versions of loads of characters and they have different commander versions, so, like, now it seems sort of obvious that they will be.
Yeah.
But, so now are you telling me that, okay, like, now, without being a neg, if I want to play new Rus, I have to buy a Bolton starter? Because that doesn't seem like a logical conclusion to me.
If you want to play new
I want to play
Rus...
new neutral Rus.
No, so new neutral Rus would be a copy of old neutral Rus. That's what I'm saying. New Rus in Bolton's would be the one with the different cards.
Don't buy it. Maybe. All right, maybe.
They have to. I'd expect them to be a bit different.
So you're basically saying, okay, so like there's 14 neutral deck, which might be the same as it currently is. Probably is the same as it currently is.
Yep.
Plus a Ramsey 6. Sorry, you got Ramsey 6, and you got Roos 6.
Yep.
Neutral. Exactly as are.
Yeah, so the 26 14... cards you could currently have if you wanted to own them.
And then there's 14 other Bolton cards.
Yeah.
And then 6 new Ramsey, which are different and are Bolton only.
Yeah.
And then 6 Roos that are new, which are Bolton only.
Potentially, yes. But that seems very odd.
Yeah, that does make sense. I had assumed that it was... Yeah, okay.
The only reason I say this is it doesn't really make sense the way that Bolton units are written, the cards as they are written. It doesn't really make sense for those Bolton cards to have the same names on them, if you know what I mean, or like the same effects. Like you can heal a Bolton unit.
Target a Bolton unit, yeah.
Because actually, by definition, they're all Boltons now.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that would be like it saying like you may heal a Stark unit within long range of this.
Exactly. Which is like, well,
they're all Stark units.
That's just like all my neutrals except that's all my things except neutrals.
And then somebody can even argue, well, yeah, but like, you know, like I'm a Stark army, so it's a Stark unit.
Yeah.
I mean, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway. So there you go.
I don't know. Like, yeah, I think it will possibly even highlight the weird, even more highlight. It is already more highlighting the weirdness of the way that neutrals exist, and
the relationship.
I hope that it highlights it such that they've already looked at it and think, yeah, God, what we should do is get rid of them. But those numbers really indicate that that's not the truth.
Yeah. We'll see. We ended up talking about that and balance and far more than I thought we would. But hey-ho, this is why we like Carlo on. So there is another thing.
Martell 2-box, right? Is that,
yeah, so the other thing is the Martell 2-box. There we go. Hey. This is a good thing.
Yeah.
6 characters.
So it should be coming out
August.
Year after actual Martell release, maybe, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, in terms of UK release, if they actually arrive in the UK in August, they basically come out 3 months after the faction came out, which would be quickety snap. But yeah, everybody else has waited a reasonably long time. I don't think Martells need heroes too. They're doing fucking fine without them. But yeah.
So this is the weird bit. I'll read the box information because I have the box information, which is a Spanish translation. Just bear that in mind. Plunged into the unbearable heat and rawness of the deserts and wastelands of the southern lands of Westeros, House Martell waits patiently like a crouching viper, watching and assessing the moves of the Game of Thrones until they find the optimal moment to strike. Cool, whatever.
Round 6.
In this sense, Ariana and Quentin Martell strive to fulfill the objectives of their house with the persistence of a snake prepared for a long hunt. Straight away, I'm guessing that those 2 characters are NCUs. Just given that they were defined in a sentence like that.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, House Dane, whose lord is Edric Dane, has vowed to do everything in its power to see Martell on the Iron Throne. I'm going to throw out there and say that Edric Dane is a commander in the box.
Yep, can agree.
In any case, with such skilled commanders as Aris Oakhart, Gerald Dane, and Damon Arena, I have no idea if that's how you pronounce his name, but or at least that's what it says in the translation. House Martell is assured of its fair share of victories to come. The problem being, it uses the word commander in that last sentence and then indicates 3 characters after it, and I doubt heavily that that character or that box will have 3 commanders or more in it, especially given that we expect Edric Dane to have a commander, and there are only 12 Cat 6 cards, meaning there should only be 2 commanders. It might be, well, we will have to see, I guess, that they offer us Edric Dane and one of the other guys as a commander. I guess we'll have to see, I guess. I don't know.
6 characters. Mugged off.
6 characters, isn't that right?
Mounted.
But yeah. Oh, it's Damon Sand, I apologise. The Spanish translation, it would have translated sand into arena. There you go. There's something I didn't know about Spanish translations. It was Damon Sand. If anyone in chat has called me out on that.
I was like, I've never heard of this guy.
Yeah. Anelia points out that the plural of Rus is Rusai. Yes. Right. So here's the sculpts, and straight away, and I know this sounds a little bit like a criticism, and I don't know. I'll just show you. This is this box, and you look at that and go, there are 6 characters. There is difference between them. Like, you can probably tell they are different. Like, these are clearly different people as well. But these are different people. Like this just from a sculpt quality, I can't really tell you exactly because the image isn't amazing. But ultimately, the quality of this box looks like you're getting 6 characters with a design aesthetic. They are different.
And I think that everybody's already struck on all the important chords, which are, if there's a single NCU or single commander in this box at the level of the NCUs and commanders that they already have, then we're in like fucking Varamir and Chariots territory, which is things were fine, and then you went and released a load of stuff, and it made everything not fine.
I'm literally going to throw it out there, right? Over in Martell, one of the favourite characters of the series, the Third Viper, right? If there is literally anyone coming out that people are excited by or want to be good, it's Gerald Dane. It's Darkstar, right? And if he's actually really good, which is what people will want, that's probably a problem. And yet if he's shit,
it's for the best.
But this is the thing: if he's really bad, it would probably be, and I don't just mean like a bad thing for Martell players. No, it's actually probably a bad thing for the game if he's bad. It would be like the mountain that rides being unplayable completely, or the mountain in any guise being unplayable in Lannisters. People will be like, "What the fuck? This guy's supposed to be a playable character. He's supposed to be this brawny guy. He's supposed to be amazing, but he's completely unplayable." If Darkstar's unplayable, we'd all sat here like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, I didn't give this box loads of thought, other than the fact that I was instantaneously
worried.
Worried about what impact it could have. Yeah. I mean, it's probably just going to end up being very low impact. I think you'd have to try really hard to make better NCUs and better commanders than they already have. You'd have to try really hard. Unless you're going to do something about the ones that they currently have. So, I don't think it's a huge worry. It just means that likely almost none of this box... Basically, the 2 outcomes are almost none of this box sees any play.
Competitively.
Or, competitively speaking. But, yeah. I mean...
Yeah, just quantifying it,
Just in all the avenues that we care about, is this box sees almost no play, or this box is the next piece which defines the most dominant faction of the game. It's like the likelihood that it like hits this balance point of exactly the same balance of what they already have is non-existent. It's almost definitely going to be weaker and not played, or turn the faction from very, very, very good into absolutely top tier.
Nacho Bear says Rob Stark is the 16-year-old king who never lost a battle and beat Tywin and Jaime, is also unplayable. So nothing would surprise him. Yeah, fair. I mean, I will be super honest though, Nacho. Rob did go through a period of being incredibly playable. And as much as I don't believe that the past transgressions or the past balance of a game should dictate the current, I would also sit here and say to you, I believe Mance should have been orbital nuked and made terrible, because for a brief period of time, like for 1 year, for 6 months, you need the thing that was really dominant to be not very good. Like, it reparations aren't a thing that I believe in. I don't believe in reparations. However, it gives you a good look. We addressed the thing that was too strong and we made it too bad, and now we'll bring it back up to the point where it's playable. That's a much better answer than trying to bring it down a level and failing, and then just ending up with what we had in Mother of Dragons between 1.6 and 2021.
There for quite a long time now.
Yeah.
He's been.
Yeah, I know. Like the fact that they didn't address the bottom is not like,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I might get excited about Martells once they start appearing at UK tournaments.
I mean, in theory, they will, right?
I mean,
Now.
there were a whole load of them down in London. They were actually those three. So, you know.
Hey, that's a good segue into the next topic, isn't it? Should we just leave it there? Here's Heroes 2. Yeah. 2 NCUs, 2 commanders. Aris Oakhart. Aris Oakhart in a Martell box. Let's go. Coming to...
Which one is he?
I think he's far right.
Okay. Yep.
Given that he clearly isn't far left, because that's the Dane guy. He's not one in because that's clearly a pirate, and he's definitely not Darkstar, who I'm 90% sure is the guy with the spear.
Does he have one arm?
It looks like he only has one arm.
It looks like he has one arm, but yeah.
That makes me wonder if they just is that just a bad shot, or does Aris lose an arm? Is that a thing?
Like, why doesn't he have a shield anymore? No curved sword. Wait, he's saying what? He's second one in?
He might be the curved sword guy. Yeah, that could actually be Aris Oakhart in the south. Because Aris
in incognito.
Incognito.
Does anybody know the guy on the far right? Does he have one arm? And does that tell us who he is? Oh no! Wait! I think the guy on the right is doing this and holding his own cloak. I think his arm is folded up in front of his face.
It is. It's like that, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. That just did that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever.
Okay.
Oh yeah, part of his
not one-armed Aris. Aris Oakhart on the right then.
No, but Aris Oakhart did go incognito, yeah. And he rap Sixer and said, yeah, he does. He goes all kind of like, it's hot down here. I'll wear the local garb, kind of thing. And then he falls in love, doesn't he? And he has this whole weird story arc of being. Yeah, I barely remember the story arc with the Martell stuff.
Yeah, see, I'm confused. I thought I just went with you on it, but I thought the far right was Darkstar.
Fair enough. It could well be. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's yeah. He doesn't look.
Yeah.
He doesn't look. Yeah.
Because he's got a very big sword.
Yes. Which and it's very ornate.
Not a relatively unimposing scimitar.
No.
The guy on the far left has a cool pose and looks.
That's
like
Edric Dane. That's Edric Dane.
Right.
100%. Far left is Edric Dane. Far right must be Darkstar, because is Darkstar got the Sword of Morning now? Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll be the Sword of Morning.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, not that into them.
Fair enough. Fair.
Maybe it will be when they arrive.
Right, we'll move on, and I'll abandon my terrible lore. I honestly, other factions maybe, but I cannot remember. Dane is a kid. Edric Dane's a kid. There you go. Edric Dane's a kid. That'll be the middle. There you go. My understanding of the Martell lore has disappeared completely. This is what happens if you don't read the books in years. There you go. Anyway,
big fail. Don't.
Sorry, guys.
Don't come here for your Song of Ice and Fire lore posting.
I'll come back next week with reparations for the Martell players out there. So the transition that the second topic of today, obviously Martell's and Bolton's coming out, which is good to see. The other last bit of information is that it is currently, I believe, Gamma that started up this week in the US. I think Gamma started today. Simon were due to be at Gamma. We may or may not see something from Gamma from Simon relating to the game. There has been nothing as of yet that's been publicly announced or anything like that. It will appear in time, I guess. All right. Okay, then. So, Carlo, the circuit.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, that came out not quite. I was reading comments at the time. Yeah, so I mean the circuit kicked off with London last week. Was it last week? I don't know. Time has been.
It was last weekend. It's not this one just gone.
All over the place. As in, not the weekend just gone.
Yep.
It wasn't as big as an event as I had originally hoped for. There were a whole range of reasons why. Like a whole load of, shall we say, excuses that can be made for why it didn't turn into the event that I wanted it to be. Mostly around other events that were also announced being really close in timing and stuff like that. But it still had a very high level of player. It was a very small but high-rated event. Mm-hmm. And it was won by Marky Mark from the Chelmsford Bunker, who has now catapulted himself into being UK's number one rated player off of the back of that event. And is the first qualifier for the Invitational through a advertised qualifying spot. There are other people who invites will be going out to shortly. I was really, really pleased at how the event went. On the weekend, I think everybody had a good time. I think it was two really, really good game days in terms of the players playing, the level of play, some really powerful lists going on, and just some really interesting stuff going on. It was the first time that Martells have really seen a lot of play inside of the UK. 3 of the 12 players playing Martell there. Mm-hmm. And so I was really pleased after I got over the fact that it wasn't as big as I hoped it to be. off of the back of that, also, I've not really announced it. It sort of just happened quietly. I've also decided that to cancel the Birmingham event.
Okay.
And just focus on the Leeds event, because the Birmingham event also had some of the same problems that the London event had, which is there is the Darlington GT and the Welsh GT, like span it just like weeks apart on either side. And so I think that it was too many events for like the UK scene to try and grow to at such a rapid rate. We've gone from having the LGT and Always Winter through to having LGT, Always Winter, and the Welsh GT, and that 3 was fine. And then all of a sudden this year it's LGT, Always Winter, Welsh GT, Darlington GT run by the DMG lot, and then I tried to add 3 more GTs on top of that, all with like not loads of notice and not enough kind of like communication and coordination between like being able to fit those dates in amongst each other.
And it would have averaged one every 1.5 months after everything told, and
exactly
even during the whole year, right?
Spread out. Yeah, even if it's completely spread out through the year, like it's going to be one every month and a half, as you say. And in reality, there seems to be nothing that happens between October and January, basically.
Late October to January's dead.
Yeah. In terms of like competitive GT level, it seems to be that everything builds up towards the LGT, and then there is dead space after it. That seems to be both international and national.
Yeah, like French Nationals was just after the LGT, right?
Yeah,
but that's
French Nationals, Polish Nationals, all these big events seem to be happening at the same. Like this seems to be starting to establish something of like a con period, an event period, which is like late the summer through to late summer, and then everybody doesn't really seem to want to play events in the direct build up to Christmas, and then it takes like time to build up into the next year after that. So anyway, it's a really, really packed schedule. So I think that Leeds has all the potential to be the event that I want it to be, which is, in the at least 30 plus into like the 40 to 50 player category. So I'm really hoping that we'll start to push that soon. It's start of August. It will be the last big event that comes into the lead up to the LGT. So hopefully it'll also hit like timing wise for people who want to prepare for that, from that perspective and stuff like that. So I was pleased with how the London one went, but early response is that too much too fast, shall we say, for the UK community as a whole. So in response to that, I'll just be focusing on making sure that the Leeds one is an event worth going to. Can have the kind of prizes for every single best in faction, every single really a trophy worth taking home, all that kind of stuff, which unfortunately we can't really kind of commit to at like a 12 player kind of level.
No.
But I think that it went well on the day and stuff like that, and I was glad to be there.
Cool. No, it's good. You mentioned running Rob prior to the show starting, and how and we talked about that anyway. The impact there. I think what for me what was quite interesting is the breakdown of factions. We see a lot of people deviating from the standardized factions from what we see in the UK. Martells and Lannister and Baratheon, which typically have a very strong outshowing in the UK, always have done, come in very low. No free folk as well, which is probably a good thing. Obviously no neutrals, so I won't comment on that. But yeah, it's a bit of a deviation, but at a small event you're more likely to get those deviations. So it's not a surprise per se.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a number of very strong UK players, but a whole range of them weren't playing what they would consider their main faction, right? Like either because they've moved on to a new faction now, or because they didn't feel that the faction was something that they wanted to play. Or, like Tom Tyler specifically, like mentioned that, he thought he would be the only Stark, and that's why he played Starks. Like I played Starks because I was specifically trying to, because I was trying to play a faction that I thought was on the weekend, so that like like when I play as the even number in the tournament, when I stand at the table and play my opponent, I want to play them 100%. Or at least, like 95%, with, like half an eye on making sure that if there's any questions and stuff like that. But I also don't want to be playing something that is knocking out somebody who, like knocking somebody's undefeated ability to go to the top of the event, if they're bringing real intent to win the event. If they've come with something really strong and they've got a real chance of winning the event, then I neither want to throw the game nor do I want to beat them. So I'm trying to play something. I'm trying to B tier, like going way back to that idea. I'm trying to play something which I think realistically has no chance of winning if my opponent just plays right. They bring a strong list and they play right. This list has no right to win the game effectively. And so that's where I feel it exists. You know what I mean? Like I think Rob in Starks is that. And so I wouldn't say that like I think that this is some kind of like off meta. Like this has play in certain places. No, like I think that it's I think that it's a shit list, which has an interesting idea, still proposes a threat to your opponent, still is a thing that can and will beat units, kill stuff, can win a game.
It asks a question.
You must take it seriously. You must play it well. But when it comes down the stretch, 2 NCUs is dog shit, guys. 2 NCUs is dog shit.
Yeah. It is, isn't it? Certainly for factions that just can't represent what the advantage that 2 NCU gives you, which I'm not going to say there is much, but the theory being that the advantage of 2 NCU giving more field presence and more points on the board, it doesn't matter if you can't leverage that advantage.
Yeah.
Right. So
I felt that Starks of everybody, and particularly so to go into it a little bit more, I felt that the list of every list out there should be able to leverage 2 NCUs better than almost anything else. As I say, this isn't just, I'll pick a unit instead of an NCU. You can't have these 2 8-point cavalry units and still get to 8 activations inside of Starks without having this exact list build, where you use Rob as a commander to get Grey Wind for 3, and you use Stormcrow Mercs to give you a free Rickon to give you an 8-point package of 2 of them. Should I have used Lyanna instead of Arya? Yes, I would say that on hindsight. Particularly because Arya only interacts with infantry, and the infantry really are not big hitters in this list. The Stark Sworn Swords did very, very little for me. I really hope that they do more. But anyway, it should be able to leverage 2 NCUs better than almost anything else, because the idea is that you're sacrificing a lot less if your first activation of the round is to charge with Tully Cavaliers than if you were playing a 3 NCU versus 3 NCU matchup, where if you chose to do that in a 3 NCU versus 3 NCU, you lose a whole one of your NCU activations. You lose so much priority on the board by going to the table first that usually it's just not doable. It's not acceptable for anybody. You also don't telegraph anywhere near as much if you leave open a zone late into the round, because you don't have to rush to the board in a 3 NCU versus 2 NCU matchup if you want to leave something open. And therefore, a late assault orders is far less telegraphed than if you did it in a 3 NCU versus 3 NCU matchup. So that has a small amount of leverage on it as well. That's where the advantages stop. I still think that it shouldn't, like, that's all you get. With Rob, you get hit and run and swift retreat or something, which should help with Tully Cavaliers, but it's not enough. Hit and run, its requirement that you begin engaged is just terrible. Like, why?
It still bugs me a lot that Benjins in Night's Watch doesn't have that requirement. Like, but it bugs me a lot.
It just means that you can't charge with Lance Cavalry and then bounce out again, meaning that you threaten to do it at the start of the round and the end of the round, or you know what I mean, whatever. Yeah. It's just really annoying. It's really, really annoying. Makes hit and run like a really incredibly niche card, which did manage to work for me in one game. I did manage to charge and then take swords in one game, but only because I did it at a very specific timing.
But like
where swords and bags were open, such that they chose to go for bags rather than swords. I mean, and this isn't a bad player's decision, you know, this was against Jacob, you know what I mean? But like I'd really managed, like I'd worked incredibly hard to generate this no-win situation for him, you know, and like managed to do it, managed to then bounce out, and then that allowed me to activate first next round and charge with Lance Cavalry and put me way ahead and really great position. And I didn't play perfectly after that, but I still, the list still didn't have the ability to close out the game because the value of 3 NCUs versus 2 NCUs just starts to drag after that. As units start to get taken off the board, NCUs still stay alive. So his activation disparity remains in his favor because you just can't kill NCUs. And the amount of economy that he gets out of them throughout the game just gets better and better. And I made some misplays such that like I didn't put enough stuff into like getting its full value out of it. But, you know, like if I'd managed to get myself in that situation in a 3 NCU versus 3 NCU matchup, I would have felt incredibly confident about closing out the game. But like I definitely should have been Littlefinger or Lyanna or something. It would have been an improvement to the list, but that's the only improvement that list can make, in my opinion. And I still don't think it cuts it. Like so, but it had play, which is I'm going to charge stuff, and I'm going to be hyper aggressive, and I'm going to
come kill you
into your face with Lance Cavalry. What are you going to do about it? And it was enough to, you know, present problems to players, and it was fun enough to play. The only game that wasn't fun to play was into Martells because they were just like amazing. All those things, no, you can't have them. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you know that charge? No, that doesn't do anything. And, oh, you know what? I'm just going to heal, and I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to do whatever. So that was the only one which was like, I was like, yeah, this list isn't fun into this matchup, and the only thing that it's supposed to be is fun. But it was an interesting change of pace because it's definitely not a style that I ever play.
It's cool. It's cool that you tried it out though, and it makes you realize. And again, it's like I do feel sometimes people say that we don't try these things out, or we don't give them credit and things like that. And I think sometimes that is true. That is definitely true. Some stuff, but there's a lot of stuff we've tried over the years of playing this game, and there's a lot of stuff we don't need to try that much because we know from feeling it and from playing it like only once or twice where you get from it. And we can test it out, you can try it out, you can try different things, but you can very quickly get a feel for how good a list is. And like conceptually, right? Did this conceptually do what I set a game plan out? Because most of the time when, as much as Carlo would probably disagree with me a little bit, he does agree with me here, probably, in that we have game plans with these lists, right? These lists are built around a concept of what it's going to do on the board. Carlo would disagree with me a little bit on this point when I say I pretty much know what my opening 2 rounds are going to look like. But when I build lists, I know what round 1 and round 2 are going to look like, almost carbon copy of what I'm going to do and what my opponent probably should be doing with their lists. And having that game plan, like really truly like solidly in place, allows you to establish a winning position in the first 2 games, in the first 2 rounds. That's what that game plan is about doing. Can I set off on the right foot in the first 2 rounds? Your ability to convert a game, slightly different, right? That's where, does the list convert? Can you as a player convert? All those kind of questions have to be asked. But initially, did those 2 rounds get played in exactly the concept that you wanted them to get played against, given your opponent what they're trying to do? And when a list that you design, that you play, and play it, when you haven't identified any key errors, and you do the thing that you wanted to do in the first 2 rounds, you get to the end of the first 2 rounds and go, nothing went badly here. Everything went as I planned it to go.
But I'm still losing. Yeah.
That's when you know the list is not, or the concept isn't strong.
Yeah.
And that's really, when you see late round 2 or round 3, you see it, like, that's where I would identify I need to take a risk. At the end of round 2 or the start of round 3, at some point there, I need to go, right, what can I do to change this game? Because I am on a decline. If I don't do something now, I will just lose eventually, or my opponent will have to make a cock up and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, if Dan, you guys have strategies? No, not really. Just winging it, mate. I mean, I would take objection to anybody. I mean, this is you, of course, Mickey, throwing is making us a we as always. Like, I would have objection. I would have objection to anybody who says that I don't try stuff out. I'm like, actually, I would say that if anything, I'm probably one of the people who's played the most wild, different list build strategies at high level tournaments of anybody in the world. Like, I've played Relentless Spam. I've played Baratheons. I played like Night's Watch when they weren't popular with War Machines. I've played 100% crossbow units and ranged armies with builders that put stakes down when it wasn't meta. I've played dragons when they're not meta. I've played dragons when they are meta. Like, I'm not afraid to play a meta list, but I've also played some of the most off meta things to top tables of GTs. So if anybody says that I haven't tried stuff out, I'd just be like, no. Anybody, I have tested the dodgiest different things at high level of anybody in this game. If I don't want to try it out, it's probably just dog shit.
I think the difference being is that, like, there's still, like,
admittedly, I've never played one NCU. Yeah. Oh my god! Like,
we've never played two. You've never played 2 NCU at a decent level, right?
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, like, if Generally speaking, not for a very long time. Like, not.
This was probably it.
Like, not for a very, very long time. Have I think I might have played like a 2 NCU Night's Watch something.
Was that
maybe in the early days of Offal? But again, that's back from like that's like back from the idea that like this list archetype is so dominant that you don't even have to use its most efficient variant to be able to win, right? Like, is more like the concept. It's not like, oh, this is the best way to play it, or like this is XYZ. Yeah, I mean, like, NCUs, like, I've just always been a 3 NCU player. Like,
it's weird. I said it before on the show, and we won't talk about it for too long, but we all started, and apart from when I was first playing Free Folk, where I literally had 2 NCUs in my starter box, and that was it for a while, I think everybody in our play group just pretty much went 3 NCUs straight away. Like we
Yeah.
it's really weird to us because when like we talk about 3NCU meta, like all the way back when stats first started up and the whole annoying discussion about NCU win rates and stuff like that, like that wasn't a discussion. As much as I know that we ended up having that discussion trying to put it to bed, it wasn't a discussion that we were having locally because it was like we've just always done this, like literally always done this. This has never been something that we thought is a good idea. But
yeah, and like I say, that's not so to say these lists that I'm like, hey, I've played all this stuff, right? Like, I'm not like, hey, I can play like any old shit and win. Well, I'm saying like, if there's like a thing that I think is different to what everybody else is doing, but like has actual reasons that it still can be good, then I will try it. I'll give it a go. You know, like, and so if I ever think that there is a reason to play 2NCU, I'll play. You know, like this list had a reason to be 2NCU, and I gave it a go. This one wasn't a case of like, oh, I think that this actually has like really corner play in the meta and is actually super strong. I knew that it would have terrible matchup into Doran NCU and Martells in general. I knew that basically if I couldn't do enough with the Lance Cavalry, it's game over, like just straight away. Like, you know, it's the only thing the list has. And I knew that even though Rob is the only way that this list exists, he's also a bad commander. Like his cards don't do enough to like I'm making the most of the fact that I'm playing Rob NCU. This, I think, would be a perfectly powerful, actually, ELO list. Like, I'd run this in ELO and be really, really happy and confident with it because I picked Rob because he's right down at the bottom of the rankings, right? Like, I think that on the balance of things, this is probably the best list that Rob can put out. Again, I'd swap Arya. I think that this might be the most powerful list that Rob can play. If you're really going to tailor to what Rob is already bringing, this might be the best that you can do. But that's starting from a very bad point, which is you've picked one of the worst commanders in the entire game. And then you've decided to do the best you can with him. And it happened that the best that you can with him has resulted in 2 NCUs, which I also think is a big indicator that there's other flaws with your list. Because...
Look, I have to admit, I played a 7 activation version of this list, basically, with Rob, and I ran him in Dervishes because synergy. But then you run the double Tully Cavaliers with not Golden Company, Glory Seekers in, with the Stubborn Tenacity now, and the Iron Resolve, and you have 2 Tully Cavalier blocks that are very hard to kill. And you're just playing, you know what it is? It's Baratheons at home. It's the Elden list at home meme. But you're doing it with Starks. Can you leverage the Lance Cavalry better than Elden can leverage
You
Cots?
gain Lance, but you've lost Hardened, you've lost Battle Endurance, you've lost like the Baratheon. Yeah, you've lost your 2+ armor, you've lost all sorts of stuff. So yeah.
The question is the same thing, but just worse, I think.
And you know, like I think that it, like I say, it was interesting to play. You know, I wouldn't take it if I'm trying to win the event. I would take it if I'm trying to build one of the best lists possible by ELO ranking, because you know that's what ELO tournaments tell you to do, and I'd run it again. I'd put a lot more thought into what its pairing would be, but you know, I blindly played it into all 5 matchups that I played. Which also didn't really help its win rate or like help its matchups. You know, like, you know, I definitely could have brought, knowing that this is going to have a wildly bad matchup into Martells, I could have at least brought like an anti-Martell list.
Triple Howland. Dan is so angry with you, no doubt, that you didn't take Howland.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to invest that much. I don't actually like Starks. But yeah, like I say, it actually created some really fun, interesting games, and I think it took some players really far out of their comfort zone, which is what I'm actually always looking to do when I play something off meta, right? When I play something off meta, I think that people undervalue putting units on the board that your opponent hasn't had much experience against, or playing a commander that your opponent hasn't had much experience against, and not knowing what their cards can do. If you're talking about like anybody but the most experienced tournament players, the players who play on TTS all the time, but like I say, like a lot of people on TTS are playing the very same things. Like, you have to really go out of your way to find some of these less well-known list builds played by somebody who like has a reason to play them like to a certain level, that I think that you can get really far by presenting challenges that your opponent isn't used to. And so I think that is underrated.
Yeah.
It only takes you so far. Like
Yeah.
You know, just having a bad list that your opponent's never seen before is still a bad list. But if you can have like a pretty good list, which is like significantly different than anything that they've ever played before, it can really put your opponent on the back foot and give you opportunities for them to make a mistake and allow you to make up for the amount that your list could be better. And I think that that's not seen that often in this game, but it's also not easy to pull off. Like you're basically hoping that your opponent is surprised,
yeah,
and makes a mistake.
Was
which
actually
isn't great game strategy going in.
It's actually two. So there's two schools of thought. Going to like the chess analogy here, there's two schools of thought. In that your opponent is good enough to just stick to principled, like what identifying before the game. This is what list you picked. This is the list I picked. What principles can I stick to that I can then beat you with because your list doesn't do this, or your list does do this, or I have this advantage from what I can see, even though I don't necessarily know what everything you do does. You stick to core principles, which is actually where, you know, as much as we'll talk about strengths, I think that's where Carlo's strength comes in. Is I think Carlo is a principled player, which is why he does well a lot of the time with basically anything. Is that he just basically plays the same stuff and the same ways. I shouldn't say the same stuff. He plays the same way in every game he plays, and that's not it doesn't matter what his list does and what he's doing. He's just making the best moves he can. And then I think you have the flip side, which is like the prep. The people who go in with perhaps less principled actions, but more, I'm going to do this janky thing that you're not used to. I'm going to present this option that you've not seen before, which is where I think myself probably falls more into, because you can prepare for it, right? And it's not a joke. Carlo once said on Tourney Ground, if you want to be really good, you probably need to know like basically anything that you're going to run into. And one of the things that I did in certainly last season is I went away and I basically knew every single tactics card from every single commander in the game. You know, learned basically every trigger in the game because I didn't want a surprise when I played my strategies. I was planning around everything. Like, it never happened. It never needed to happen. But I was like looking at certain matchups back in the day, last season, and being like, this matchup, it presents an interesting problem that I need to think of a solution for. And it wasn't the case if I had to think a solution on the fly. A lot of these times, like, people were like, how do you beat double cots kind of thing? And it's like, well, the whole idea of not fighting them, I will actually just literally run away from them all game. I will not give them the light of day. I'll run away from them. But that was my strategy before I even entered the game, because I'd already thought about what my solution and plan were. And I was like, the maths doesn't work out. I can't kill them. So I'm not going to try.
And that's not something that you do on the fly.
Yeah.
That's like already predetermined.
Yeah. When
you lock the list in, you're like, if he picks champs, then I'm going to be running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that level of kind of like prep that you can put in, you can put a lot of prep in. This game is to some extent quite formulaic, in that every action is just a simple thing that happens. And it has certain triggers. Everything is an option you can do. Your opponent can do janky things. They can change things up. But ultimately, they're probably still going to do these things. And every time they don't make a play that's particularly optimal, you stop and go, okay, cool, so that was a disadvantage they've given themselves. Can I optimize on that? Or is actually just that, yes, it might be a slight misplay, but there isn't really anything I can do off the back of that. And I think that is, to some extent, quite formulaic. In that every action is just a simple thing that happens. And it has certain triggers. Everything is an option you can do. Your opponent can do janky things. They can change things up. But ultimately, they're probably still going to do these things. And every time they don't make a play that's particularly optimal, you stop and go, okay, cool, so that was a disadvantage they've given themselves. Can I optimize on that? Or is actually just that, yes, it might be a slight misplay, but there isn't really anything I can do off the back of that. And then that comes down to, and it really does come down to when we talk about like specific moments and planning and prep and all these things, it comes down to literally moments in games where you can identify a critical error that people don't see as a critical error, but leads to a catastrophic failure of their list functioning. And you go, that one thing that you did wrong, that one little thing is game over. Like, that is it. Game is now literally over.
Yeah, I had a case of that, which was the most extreme actually I've ever had. Where my entire game against Isaac fell apart on a 2+ charge, which I failed for a 1.
Yep.
But the catastrophic the error isn't choosing to take the charge because it was still good odds, still good strategy and all that kind of stuff. And like what became of it was actually like a calamity of like literally the worst things that could possibly happen. But the critical error, which is literally just like you lost the game there's no doubt about it, is that I used an Arya token to take a maneuver and just didn't check that I'd put myself within 6. So there was no need for the charge to be 2+. Like the charge could have been 1+. So it could have been an automatic charge. And so, I mean, it's Clash of Kings, it's Rob choosing to take precision on his activation and make a charge into the flank of my opponent's knights, which only have 2 wounds left. So the chances that on a disordered charge, I don't still also wipe him out, meaning that I gain 2 points because it's commander killing a unit, all this kind of stuff, plus surge forth out of range. And the calamity of what actually happened is that I failed the charge, failed the morale off of taking a test, despite being within embolden range, lost 3 models. What it left me in was now I was just within range for some crossbows to be able to shift, see me, and shoot me in the flank, which if I make the charge, I align and I can't be seen.
Mm-hmm.
He shoots me with 6 dice, which does 6 wounds, and I take another 2 wounds on a morale test. So I've gone from being a 12-wound unit that charges something in the flank and almost definitely kills it, to being 1 model within the space of 1 action.
Yeah.
And everything fell apart from there because I also, like, I was fully activated now and I couldn't get out of range of the crossbows. So, like, I was just sat there ready to die, like, at a later point. Everything fell apart. Activation advantage out the window because, like, units just been killed. I had to pile, like, 3 more units into these knights to kill them before they eventually died because I'd activated leaving bags open under the large assumption that I was going to finish off this unit with only 1 wound. I mean, I would have to like reassess the real, like whether or not a disordered charge was still so guaranteed to kill. But I still think like so strongly into it. Like he had 2 wounds. It was into the flank. I had precision. Like everything was in my face.
Were you weakened?
No.
Yeah, I mean, full rank, 7 dice on 4s with nothing else. You expect to get 3.5 hits, maybe 1 auto wound, 2 hits average.
I've never had a game fall apart so fast from one particular move. But nothing's to blame except for my own positioning because the charge could have been auto. Like, there's no reason why the charge shouldn't have been auto except for the position that I put my unit in. I had loads of movement spare when I did the Arya token, and yeah, like, you know, games fall apart like that if they're close, you know, and if they're a good player, like can like take the opportunity that you've given them and just absolutely run with it. So yeah, it's never been that extreme for me before.
No. That's big sad, that is. All right then.
It makes for quite a good game, actually, because it was surprisingly cruise control in my favor to absolutely not in my favor in a very short space of time.
It's that can happen. That can happen quickly if things don't go your way. Certainly, it is a dice game. Obviously, yes, the one is the killer, but really, it's not about that. It's the situation. Right.
Back to London, Mark absolutely annihilated everybody. It was 6 rounds, even though there were only 12 players. I mean, Isaac and Jacob both went through 4 wins, 2 losses. So did Tom Tyler, actually. But he resigned one of his games, as he likes to do. So he lost a victory point for that. So I believe he would have been second or something if he hadn't resigned that game. But his matchup score would have been different. So it's not like that's that clear cut. But I mean, Mark absolutely smashed people with Jon Snow mostly. Pretty dominant performance, actually. I even when he was 3-0 after the first day and he was the only undefeated player, which is a 50-50 could or couldn't be with 12 players after 3 games, I still was like, I'm pretty sure he'll lose tomorrow. Like I was like, he's probably going to end up 5-1 and somebody else will end up 5-1 and we'll end up with a paired top. But no, he just absolutely smashed everyone to 6-0. Super dominant performance. So he bags himself an invitational slot, which hopefully will start to shape up all the entrants for really soon. I'm just waiting for tickets to be able to be available for me to point people towards. And then I'll start to try and get people in and announce who they are. Hoping to aim towards 6 to 8 international travelers again for that. We'll be sending invites out to national champions from across Europe.
Cool.
I mean, technically, they have. I offered it out to some NA people as well, but I think I already got what will almost definitely be no's, which is they weren't yeses. Which means they ain't gonna magically turn up in London. But yeah, I really hope to see Spaniards, Italians, Poles, maybe Swedish as well, nationals, all that kind of stuff.
It's cool. Yeah, look forward to it
this year.
Yeah, I look forward to it a lot. I think it's going to be good fun. Last year was good fun, and I fully expect this year to be equally good fun. It's
Germans. Germans. That's the national. Germans. I was like, there's a whole Song of Ice and Fire nation that I'm overlooking here. I listed them off, and I was like, Swedes.
The Greeks. That's the other one, right?
Yeah, exactly evil. Maybes are no. Maybes are no's that people who don't want to tell you no.
Yeah, 100%. All right then. Obviously, the Leeds event in August. That's going to be a big one. Do hopefully check that out. Hopefully get a lot of people at that event. And I'm also looking forward to seeing people certainly in the Northern GT here in my local area, the Woods, as well. So that'll be there as well. I also want to give congratulations to, and he was here earlier, so I don't know if he still is, but there was the Canadian national event that was ran this last week, this last weekend, in fact, and it was run by this man here, who people may or may not know this man as Endline Richard, who is an absolute legend. Overall, nice guy.
There's a big looking trophy there.
That is a very big looking trophy, isn't it? So yeah, there we go. It's got models on the top as well, which is awesome.
Congrats! I wonder whether or not he's going to head to US Nationals. If that's what we're calling it.
Let's see if they invite him.
Yeah, well, I think it maybe had one. Oh, he's still in chat. Do you know if you qualified for US Nationals off the back of that? Endline?
If he does. It's a good picture, Richard. I think it's awesome. The fact that you're holding that with one hand with what looks like relative ease just tells me that you're incredibly buff.
Is that the Kickstarter golden throne?
The throne, yeah.
Iron throne.
He's getting married this summer, so it's unlikely. That's unfortunate.
That answers
Not
whether or not you're
getting married.
going. It doesn't quite answer the question of whether or not you're invited. But yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that they are, whether they do or not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I believe that it is opened up to Canadian regional qualifiers and national qualifiers, right? Too.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, congrats.
You thinking of making the trip over this year, Carlo, at all to the US?
No, I
No.
I can't keep going to the US like twice a year, every year. Which I mean, I went to the US twice last year, so I can't go again.
That's fair enough.
I may or may not make it to somewhere in Europe. I may make it to France, Spain, something like that. There's a Luxembourg tournament, but like that is the extent to which I'm likely to travel for an event this year.
This year,
we'll see whether or not. I think that the UK scene currently offers everything that I want from Song. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want for a lot. Like, as we talked about at the start, like I'm not desperate to play games. I would like them to kind of like reinvigorate my interest in the game, but like I don't hold my breath for it. So yeah, I think maybe the time of me traveling to events and really wanting to get out there and play as much as possible might have passed, or it might just be a bit of a trend at a short term thing that I'm not quite as keen as I was, and it'll come back again. I do hope it will. I really enjoyed the event in Scotland. I really enjoyed playing it Always Winter, but I just I don't think about the game as much as I used to. Like, in all honesty, like I really don't think about the ins and outs of like meta matchups, like list builds that I think would be good or bad, or do you know what I mean? Like, whatever. Like, I mean, speaking of which, like Endline sent me a message the other day, like asking about my opinion on a list, and or like like how I would do Targ dragons, and like I didn't even reply. Sorry, Endline. Because honestly, I was just a bit like, I don't know. I don't think about it.
Yeah.
and I think Brett like asked me more recently about some stuff about John, and I was just like, Brett, mate, I don't think about the game like that anymore. Like, I used to be like all I'd think about, like in the when I'm bored at work, when I'm doing whatever, when I'm like, all I'd think about is like what things I was going to play next Friday, what lists they were going to be, how it was going to be different, how it was going to be better than last week, how it was going to be X, Y, Z, how it was going to be all these things, and how basically it was going to be a new and interesting idea for me. But either I got to the end of them all, or something just changed such that I don't think about the game like that anymore. I know I'm not going on to Marvel Snap, Doug.
It's
in a lot of ways, I do feel like I'm ready to. It feels like I'm ready to move on to something else and just play a different game. That's what's always happened in the past. But I really don't think that another game's gonna be better. Like, like I really don't want to play a different game. I just want to play this game.
I think it's. I'll be honest with you. I think it's burnout, in that I was kind of there.
Is, but like I've barely played. Like,
but burnout doesn't have to come from playing. Burnout can come from enthusiasm for the things that you like, right? I'll be super honest. I am burnt out with the game. and now I just want to play it for fun because I enjoy the game. And this is kind of the halfway house in that it's hard to play it for fun for me, because it's like I'm going to play some real janky shit that probably doesn't work. And I just want to stick it on the board and have some fun with it. I don't want to have to think about building the list. I don't want to have to think about that. I actively try not to apply a lot of time and effort. And
yeah,
and that means that
in
your
some
performance
ways,
drops. Literally, like seen it in my I've dropped 100 points in the last week.
In some ways, it gives me a slightly new perspective on the game because, like, you know, like I feel like maybe it's a mindset that other people like always have towards the game, or do you know what I mean? Like some people just think about the game in that way, or like what's the point? Some people have the way I currently think about the game and the amount that I think about the game and the amount that I prepare for the next game that I'm about to play is probably more like the average player prepares for the next game and thinks about their next game. They don't know that there are people out there who, like, at times, like, they'll think about a Song of Ice and Fire for 10 hours of their waking 14 hours in the day. I mean, not actively. They're not like literally sat there like doing whatever. But, you know, like it's there on their mind. Like it's the thing that they think about when they're trying to fall asleep. It's the thing that they're thinking about when they first wake up. They've had a new idea and they want to go think about it. And so I think that I'm in a happy enough place with the game that, like, I still like it. I still think that the mechanics are beautiful, elegant, and stuff like that. Unfortunately, there isn't a narrative side to the game. Going back to like that thing about wanting characters, there's nothing else that captures me that says like, okay, well, when I'm not chasing the competitive side, I could at least build this narrative list. And I'll just play that for a while. And so, yeah, I am waiting for something to change for me to care as much as I used to. But maybe it'll never come back.
Be the change that you want, Carlo. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely burnout of some type, isn't it? And I actually, mine stems from discussions that I've had with things like the community FAQ and other things, and I know where mine stems from. And to some extent, you're probably on the same boat here. I don't know. It's the rules. I'm fed up actually having to have conversations about the rules. Because it's like...
I checked out of them a long time ago.
Yeah, I know. Like,
they're why I don't post on Discord.
I know. I've basically stopped a lot of times.
That places a cesspit of rules arguments.
But it's not rules discussions that get me in the traditional places. It's like even trying to hash the rules out. It's like this is just tiring. It's tiring and it feels fruitless. I'd much rather just what's your gut feeling on this? Just fucking go for that. Whatever. I do
think you're right in
care about the outcome.
Yeah, I do think that you're right that I do always find that there's an amount of burnout which happens when I'm working on the site a lot, and you know, like I am working on the site like a lot at the moment because I'm trying to build like a whole 2.0, and so some aspect of me is basically thinking about A Song of Ice and Fire still for like 10 hours a day. You know, like I'm working on the site, like, or like thinking about the next thing or the thing that I can't get through at the moment, the problem that I'm having, coding wise, right? But I'm not thinking about any of the enjoyable side of the game. Yeah. So I'm not thinking about, you know, I don't end that 10 hours with like, oh, I've come up with a cool new list idea, or I've come up with a new one. I'm just like, cool, right? Well, that button works now.
It's all game adjacent. It's game adjacent thinking, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Game adjacent. Yeah. So I have huge amounts of game adjacent thought at the moment. Also running the circuit. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like, okay, I need to like promote the event, need to get the rules pack together, need to do X, Y, Z, try and get people to it. And so I remain incredibly involved
in a Song of Ice and Fire. I'm not that distant from a Song of Ice and Fire, and yet play so few games of it. And so maybe I'm still just like burnt out and exhausted with a Song of Ice and Fire, like in general. Which that could change. Hopefully it will. But we'll see.
We will.
I think that Simon in general are making good decisions. That's not what I mean. The actions that
they're making good decisions. That's not what I mean.
Each of the I can't point at the things that they are doing.
They aren't doing anything wrong.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing wrong with the things that they are doing, is the best way to put it. I just think I want them to do more. Like for me also, like it could be anything. Like it could be like bring back those narrative like things that they, that could get me interested again, right? Yeah. Like if they pull out those narrative missions, might play them. More balance changes so that I might be excited to play units that I haven't played in a really long time, or excited to play a faction that I haven't been interested in a while.
Linus in chat saying we highlight the negatives. No, that's just because we're negs all the time. No,
it's very British. My life again, Linus.
It's very British to complain about literally everything, Linus.
You just caught my line of thought like completely dead there with like, you are currently highlighting the negative things, which may also be due to the fact that you're burnt out. It's like, have you been here before, Linus?
It is.
But
true.
yeah, I think that like of the things that Simon have done, I don't have issues with them. Even like with the US Nationals, like opening up a bit more to Canada and stuff like that, and like improvement with regionals being slightly wider spread now and stuff like that, and things that they're doing over there. I don't think they're bad things, but at the same time, I'm like, and their collaboration with Frontline Gaming that they made. I've not been super
versed,
like on point, versed with it. But what's going on with Sunday Slaughter and the collaboration that they have there with content creators, but then at the same time, I'm still left like kind of like, hey, EU, like like can we have an official national championship yet, or do you know what I mean, like kind of thing. I'm still left like there's more that you could do, which could maybe reinvigorate my excitement and stuff like that. But yes, what they do isn't wrong. Do more of it. And talk to us quarterly.
But, yeah, it's definitely interesting. And I won't touch on one of the other points that we'd actually been talking about briefly, Carlo, the other day, which is content in terms of like what could be done in content wise. Which of course there could be loads.
Doug says that the new Game of Thrones minigame will put pressure on them. No.
Nah.
Night models are absolute dumpster fire. Night models make Simon look like the most professional, well-drilled, communicative outfit you've ever seen by comparison. I have zero interest in anything that Night models produce.
Is that just because the Batman game, while was interesting models and things like that, was to use your words, a dumpster fire of a game?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it is. Like, they've, like, if you think that distribution for Song is bad, like, Night models distribution's a whole order of magnitude worse. The availability of those miniatures is non-existent. So even if people look at them and think that they're cool, you won't be able to buy them, like, not in any magnitude. And so, yeah, I don't think that that's a problem. Actually, the thing I'm finally scared about after a very long time of not caring about is I think that Warhammer Fantasy might actually be coming back now. they released some articles recently. I forget how long ago it was. I don't know if you talked about them last week.
Didn't.
With Dave. I don't know if they were out last week. I think they were, because I remember I was talking with Chris about them. I think they came out the weekend just before, right? Yeah. Warhammer Fantasy has released pictures of Bretonians photographed on new bases, which is an interesting point along the progression, because they've committed to something at that point, right? Like, people are painting production level miniatures, which means that they're possibly currently printing up rule books, or like finalizing rule books. And yeah, I mean, Chris was more on this. Elite Teddy was more about this than I was. But I do agree with him that all it would take is for a period of time where everybody rushes from A Song of Ice and Fire to try out new fantasy, and then remembers why fantasy is shit, right? Because let's be honest, like, Games Workshop games, we look at them with rose-tinted goggles, right? Like, Games Workshop games are bad. Even if this game is crap, it has the real potential to do irreparable damage to the size of the A Song of Ice and Fire scene, in my opinion. Because somebody commented way earlier, and they're right, the majority of people who play A Song of Ice and Fire, in my opinion and experience, are Warhammer Fantasy refugees. And if Warhammer Fantasy offers something, and what I was more concerned about that I'd never been concerned about before, is it's literally your old models are back on the table. So the barrier to entry for people who used to play Fantasy to come back and play Fantasy again is so low. The barrier is, can you be bothered to rebase your old miniatures onto bigger bases? And if it has any amount of success, then it can take growing or just getting there or just big enough existence-wise competitive communities and slash them in size such that they go into a death spiral. And I don't think I'd ever been concerned about fantasy before I saw this article. Partly because I thought it was still years away, and partly because I didn't think that it would hit home with old fantasy players as much as it does.
Do you know what's really interesting?
No praise in these photos, but when they take images of for rule books and articles and stuff like this, they never use trays.
Yeah,
they act like the game doesn't use trays, but then they do use trays.
Do you know what's super interesting about these? And this is actually maybe very damning. I think that Warhammer are playing down what they're looking to achieve with this. Because I don't think that these models that they're presenting us are significantly different or better than old fantasy stuff, to be honest. They are better, but not significantly better.
What do you mean? You mean talking about the models themselves?
The models, yeah.
The models are the old models. They're not remakes. They're literally the old models.
Holy shit! Okay, I didn't even realize. I didn't realize that.
We're bringing, and literally they're like, guys, we're bringing back the old kits. They are the old models, which is what concerns me the most, because I have cupboards full of old models, which I had assumed I wouldn't want to use anymore, and I would have to spend hundreds of pounds to play Fantasy again. But they're not. I can just pull them out of the cupboard and play. All I have to do is rebase my old models.
Okay, I hadn't actually worked that. I hadn't realized that. I hadn't read the article.
And one of the reasons why it's Bretonians is because Bretonians are one of the things that have the highest resale value of old models.
And they never saw.
That's why they're showing off Bretonians, because Bretonians, Knights of the Grail, all that kind of stuff, are have the most prevalent secondhand market in fantasy marketplaces.
It's because they never got replaced in Sigmar, right? Whereas a lot of other things, not strictly speaking true, a lot of other things in Sigmar kind of got replaced with newer stuff, whereas Bretonians were already outdated come the end of fantasy, right?
Yeah.
But
these are, like, I think, newly painted.
Yes, newly painted.
They're doing Siocast versions of Bretts. Okay.
Fair enough.
Okay, but so, like, I think, I'm more concerned about fantasy. I'm way more concerned about fantasy than I am about the night than I am about the Night Miniatures game. I think the Night Miniatures game will be nothing. Nobody cares. Night Miniatures are a travesty. Games Workshop have the capability to destroy any game that they feel like if they just create something very similar to it. And I think that song has existed for the entirety of its lifetime in the absence of Warhammer Fantasy. Its existence came into play after Fantasy died, effectively. It was driven and spurred on by the absolute shit show of how bad Age of Sigmar is and how different a game it was, and how A Song of Ice and Fire in many ways captured the good parts of fantasy, but was a much, much better rule set. Did Aeronautica destroy X-Wing? I think FFG destroyed X-Wing, but maybe. Like I mean, Aeronautica did. They coincide a bit. Is Warhammer Fantasy an alternating activation game? It didn't used to be, Doug. Oh, who knows? Who knows? I'm concerned about Warhammer Fantasy, and all these discussions like, is it going to be X, Y, Z? Is it going to be blah, blah, blah? The game doesn't even have to be good, and yet it would still maintain the capability to destroy Warhammer Fantasy, in my opinion. Warhammer Fantasy would have the capability to destroy A Song of Ice and Fire while being a significantly worse game with worse quality miniatures at a higher price point, just because it has Games Workshop behind it.
The behemoth that it is.
It has history and nostalgia to so many people who are in A Song of Ice and Fire. Even if they only go back to it on a casual basis, even if they only go back to it for a short period of time, it could do irreparable damage to the growth of A Song of Ice and Fire. And this is something that I've been harping on about for a long, long time, which is, I think, the most unfortunate thing is that I don't think that Simon ever quite understood what they could have grown the game into.
Yeah.
In the period of time that they've had. They've had it very easy for the past couple of years. They actually saw surprising, unprecedented growth during COVID because of how loved the TTS mod was. They should have come off of the back of that and pressed really hard to grow the game and gain like a real foothold market share, such that this game could be like an order of magnitude bigger than it currently is. And then we wouldn't be worried about other things coming along and crushing the future of the game. But we still remain at a precipice while growing and getting slightly better every year, and like, you know, like bigger and better tournaments every year by like, you know, a margin, not as big a margin as I would still like. You know, I'd still like to be able to say that we can host like 300-400 person tournaments for this event, but you know, we're so far off that. The chances that regresses on the launch of Warhammer Fantasy is a real issue that I'm nervous of. I still don't know the dates. You know, Warhammer Fantasy could still be a year and a half off.
Yeah.
By which time A Song of Ice and Fire may have either run its course and will never get to the point of being able to run 300-400 person tournaments, or it may have achieved it. And if it had achieved that, then I think that it becomes somewhat immune to going into a death spiral based off of another game launching. So we'll see. But I was nervous for the first time in a long time.
We will. We'll see. It certainly something that has to be considered about. And yeah. All right then. What is now becoming a bit of a theme, Carlo, is we'll go through what's coming up in tournaments-wise. I don't know how much you actually look through the tournaments anymore. I know you used to actually look through and scan them. But it's becoming a theme. What country is going to have the best representation this week? What do you think?
I'm going to go Poland.
Poland's a safe bet. I thought you didn't play the meta. The meta pick is Poland.
Where the safe money's at, isn't it?
Such a meta chaser. Right. We have an event happening in Krakow in Poland this weekend. Up to 32 players. I'm actually just going to dip into that, see how many people are currently signed up. Only 5 at the moment. Oh, but it's quite a few. Oh, well, yes. Waiting list is getting there. Okay, cool. Beer keeps a man alive too in Duisburg, in Duisburg even, in Germany. We've got the first tournament of Sommermeister in Demo E-Minis. Oh, that's an odd name. Oh, E-Minis. It's a new shop. Cool. That's awesome. So the first tournament in Barcelona of a new store that's opened up, clearly, or a new producer or something like that that's opened up. Supported by that. That's cool. That's happening this weekend. We've got one in Madrid, Spain. Their April event. We've got an event in Russia, simply called Wild April. It's a Wild April in Russia, clearly. We've got an event in Pruszków. I've never heard of Pruszków in Poland. A small event there. Poznan, Poland. Yeah. We've got the Zombie Planets event in Albany, New York, USA, and Madison, Alabama, USA for the Rocket City. Third tournament in the Rocket City series. The Rocket City events have always been pretty good ones, and there will probably be a stream of this, no doubt, which you'll be able to find because they're typically quite good at streaming the Rocket City events. There's also an event in East Windsor, CT. What state is CT? God, Carlo, you're going to have to... CT's a new one for me.
CT. God. I mean...
I can't go to the map. Connecticut. There you go. I forgot that was a state completely there. There you go. So, event happening in Connecticut.
Pity, isn't it? Pity, isn't it?
Yeah. An event happening in Verona, in Wyoming. An event happening in Edwardsville, Illinois. Wow. US. Sacramento as well. House of the Badger 2. Good to see House of the Badger continuing to put on events. An event happening on just the Sunday in Wrocław in Poland. We've got... an event happening in Bologna, in Italy. Is this a different group, or is this the same group that we're seeing? So it is in collaboration with the House of Orcs, a couple of new players. But yeah, look at that. Well, that's a 25-player event happening in Italy, which is good for Italian events. That's a very good size event, and there's a lot of the familiar names and faces that we see from the House of Orcs, the Melodium Knights, which have been to events before, which include people like Vivi Victorian. That's a good one to look out for this Sunday happening in Italy. We've also got the Board and Sword event happening in Toronto, Ontario, happening this weekend as well. And also an event happening in Arizona, Scottsdale. And that leads us to the end of this week. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 events. And I'm going to be honest, Carlo, I think US gave you a run for your money.
Yeah, I was going to say more American. Yes. More American than Poland.
Yeah, I reckon...
Go USA. 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 Not patronising at all.
Yeah, four Polish events and at least 6 or 7 American events. Which is amazing.
Speaking of USA, and seeing them on the channel for once, Ronnie reached out to me. He's running an event, Battle of the Red Keep. It's on the 27th of May in Florida, I assume. Pensacola,
Florida. Yeah.
He says their 6th event since the start of last year. So he also sent me some pictures of some really good prize support that he's managed to put together. So check that one out, guys. About a month away, 5 weeks away, maybe. So you could even have time to try and organise getting there. There is, of course, all the frontline gaming opens that are happening. I know I've been chatting a lot to Dumpy Chambers, who's been grilling me. I know that he's putting in a huge amount of effort into trying to make sure that these are the best possible events that they can, promoting them as much as possible. All the work that he's doing around generally trying to get people to other people's events, I think is brilliant, and I think might even already be starting to have a noticeable impact. In terms of growing the US scene. So I think there are some really good things going on in the US at the moment. I think the community is finally starting to embrace and grow its competitive side in the right way. I think that it's always had a weird relationship in the past with the competitive side of song. It's some kind of dirty word that it's something that only a very few people should do. But I think that they're really starting now to have people in the community champion events as much more celebrations of song in the wider aspect, enjoyment of just going to play, enjoyment of playing the tournament no matter where you think you're going to finish. And I think that that's really, really good stuff. So, that really does start at home. It starts player by player. It starts with somebody, really helping just to promote events that aren't their own events and all that kind of stuff. So I think that there's some good stuff happening there. We'll see how the Frontline series progresses. I think that it has the opportunity to be really strong, but I still think that it's, leaning heavily on the community itself, right? I don't think Frontline are leading the US community, but I think that it's shown that when you have a series that you can work towards and you know what to expect from each event and they're sort of standardized and you can know further in advance that all of these are qualifiers for nationals that you might want to go to, we start to see what impact that can have, positively speaking. And so I do hope that they start to roll out these same kind of things to Europe, because I think that they have been lacking. But I think that the US is running with the idea right now, and the community is endorsing the idea, just in general, of competitive play, not just of the frontline events, but of regional qualifiers through into a bigger nationals. Hopefully, I hope that the nationals goes really well and it's bigger than last year and can get up towards the towards the 100 person mark. That really will make it a showcase event. And so I wish them all the best of luck with that, because hopefully that would then suggest to Simon that, hey, if you did this in other countries, then you could see the same kind of response. I think the American community are maybe having the best time that they've ever had, and are possibly undergoing the most growth out of anybody at the moment, which is surprising considering that it's not like it was a small community. I just think that the competitive side of it is growing faster than anywhere else.
It's certainly got the most scope for growth, being such a large,
it has huge scope to still be a way bigger game there. when I talk about the opportunity that we could have a 300 or 400 person event, like that can only happen in the US, realistically, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
that is if the game reaches its potential in the US. If the game reaches its potential in the US, you could have LVO have 300 entrants, in my opinion. But we'll see. We'll see if they really keep making steps towards that.
Yep. Yeah. Well, awesome stuff. And on a bit of a high there. Well done to everything there. And, you know, well done to obviously all the community people out there. And I don't mean community content creators, but like the likes of Dumpy Champions and people like that. It's the people putting time and effort into grow scenes and to put effort into to encourage people along to game nights and put on demo games and, you know, all of that side stuff.
And every TO who's like sacrificing their time to run an event and, you know, like, you know, put together prizes, put together all this stuff, you know, it's it really makes or breaks the growth of the community in your area. And, you know, even if you put all the work in the world, you know, you still might end up with a 12-person circuit, you know, which wasn't the event that I wanted to run size-wise, but it was the event that I wanted to run with the way it happened on the day, right? Like, and so I'm still happy with that part, and I hope that next time I'll run it just the same, but with more people there and be able to give that experience to more people. So yeah, we'll see.
As we've always said, guys, sizes of events aren't that important when it comes to growing the game and progressing the game and showing the game off. You know, what matters is events are running, and that 4-player event happening in the middle of nowhere, Poland, has arguably just as much importance as that 200-player event happening in the middle of England. Yes, they're different things, but like, you know, what matters is that the game is being played and the game is growing. And that 4-player
Especially
event turns
if
to an
Ravens
8-player.
playing in that 4-person event, then I care about
it. Fair. All right then. Well, thank you very much.
Still got a man crush on Blood Raven, so you know, don't worry about that one.
Who doesn't? Well, thank you very much for everyone tuning in again. We'll probably be back, or I'll be back next week to discuss something, no doubt. Maybe it's with a slightly different take while I build some terrible lists using Sentinels and try them out this week or something like that. And between now and then, enjoy your gaming, enjoy your time away. And I'll see you again next week.
Thanks for wasting 3 hours with me. Bye-bye.
Ready? Aim!
There's too many.
Anyone see my mammoth?
Stumpy!